Hello everyone, this is the story of what if Naruto sank into the forbidden warmth of Hinata. The play's the thing. The hall of the Hotel Fukoku was abuzz. A large theater had been built within it. There was a tremendous bustle of activity in the minutes before the start of the play. The crowd was excited, and the sound of their animated conversations could be heard throughout the building. Everyone needed an outlet of sorts. The past decade had been a difficult one for the Hidden Leaf Village. Skirmish after skirmish, war after war, life and death. Things had changed drastically in the way that fighting and dying were done. No less change had been seen in the social order of both civilians and shinobi, and in the very fabric of life in general. Social classes had sprung up where once there were none. Ninjas alone were not enough to keep the people safe from the ever-changing threat. Men who were once slated to become artisans, farmers, and laborers instead found themselves soldiers, spies, and support staff. It was a much harsher world in some ways. As a result, people tried harder to grab hold of joy and happiness wherever they presented themselves. The arts were in much greater demand. Everyone wanted some way to escape from the constant turmoil brewing outside the Great Wall of Konoha. There were signs that the constant warring was wearing down the other villages and nations, too. That provided a glimmer of hope that things might revert back to the way they once were. But, that night, with the play about to begin, such issues were neither here nor there. A clan chief shepherded his son through the room, impressing upon him the intellectual magnitude of the performance. A group of soldiers stood in their dress uniforms. Bottles of sake stashed where their commanding officers couldn't find them. A gaggle of single unattached women laughed and giggled together, waving colorful fans in front of their faces. A shady character, one of the few thieves of Konoha, moved through the crowd, stealing silk handkerchiefs, purses, and any jewelry within easy reach. Orphans, chaperoned by an old matron, all squirmed in their seats. Happy to be out of the children's home, but bored by all pomp and circumstance. Two elegant ambassadors, swords strapped to their waists, tread through the crowd, aloof and condescending. They were from a foreign land, and considered the shinobi and civilians to be beneath them. In turn, they were the butt of countless jokes and whispered conversations. The public viewed them as haughty vain, glorious men with no understanding of the common people and the world they lived in. The lamps above the stage were lit one by one, causing the crowd to cheer. They knew that the curtain would be rising any minute. Their excitement and anticipation were contagious. Just the same, there were a few individuals who were present more out duty than any love of theater. One of them walked in looking somewhat disheveled, only having recently returned from a long and difficult mission. This way, Anko spoke in a firm voice, making no effort to hide her opinion of the woman at her side. I can find you a good seat where you can clap and coo all you like. She had been given the task of shepherding and safeguarding a visiting ninja from Takigakure, the hidden village of the waterfall. Why, thank you. Apot, the visiting shinobi, smiled as a group of young men crowded around her. Her smile didn't fade when she saw her companion chase them all away. This is the first performance I've been able to see in the 2 weeks that I've been a visitor here. I'm happy for you, Anko said, her eyes searching the crowd. She would relish a little strife, even though she had spent the last few weeks at war. Tomorrow you will also get to go out on your first mission, right? She kept from sneering. What did the leaf need with hangers on like this? The girl looked more like a courtesan than a shinobi. The waterfall had little to offer in men, money, or political clout. Yes, Apot admitted. I'm so excited. I never imagined that I could be part of something so big. It will be just like in the books and movies. The people in my village never get a chance to become part of history. History. Wonderful. Anko shook her head. Her latest battle had seen the end of Orochimaru once and for all. If anything was historic, it was the fighting that saw the end of that blight on her life. She scrutinized the girl at her side, wondering if anyone could truly be that vapid and out of touch of reality. I hope he goes on the mission too, Apot said, blushing, telling a disinterested Junin that she had her heart set on someone. She clasped her hands to her chest and looked across the room, trying to catch sight of someone. It was love at first glance. He's so wonderful. I heard that he always attends the plays. Lucky him, Anko said, looking for someone to relieve her. Lucky you. Her spirits lifted some. when she took note of men carrying large trays strapped over their shoulders. Wine cellars. A nice bottle of wine might go a long way towards improving her mood. She'd prefer a good fight. But beggars can't be choosers. Miss Anko. Ichigawa, a baker of great fame, waved. Miss Apot, it's wonderful to see you again. The young woman had visited his shop the previous day. Have either of you seen Hyuga Hinata? Why do you ask? Anko raised her hand, calling over one of the vendors. She is one of my usual patrons. Because of her, people who love poetry and feet have taken to visiting my shop in great numbers. I owe her a lot. He looked around the room. I'm afraid there might be some trouble tonight. Trouble? Apot bowed her hand to her mouth. What kind of trouble? Something exciting. Is this something that will require the village guard? Anko asked. Is it an Anbu matter? She narrowed her eyes. Is that why you were looking for her? Apot sat quietly, her eyes wide. She was a big fan of intrigue and mystery. For good reason. Suzuka is performing in the play tonight. Ichigawa said. Everyone at my shop was talking about it. He wrung his hands. The two of them always spit sparks when they come across one another. Well, Hinata's dislike for Suzuka is hardly a secret, Anko said, waving her hand in dismissive fashion. I don't see why that should be such a big worry. You know the weight that she carries with the arts, Ichigawa said. She has banned Suzuka from performing on stage for an entire month. Who is this Hyuga Hinata? Apot had never heard that name before. Is she the theater owner? The head of the Actors Guild? She is a shinobi like yourself, Ichigawa said. And the daughter of the Hyuga clan chief. Hinata is one of the Anbu squad leaders. You probably won't catch any sight of her or them during any mission you're on. Anko added. She has also become a very accomplished poet and musician. And a master swordsman, Ichigawa said. I guess I should have said swordswoman. She's one of the few shinobi that has taken to the sword, in addition to her other skills. He shrugged. Mainly it's the soldiers who use swords. Their officers carry them about, trying to look important. He sighed. Dueling has become a big thing lately. He had lost a few good customers that way. Anko frowned. Ichigawa was a great baker. But he had a tendency to talk too much. As she listened, the man began to describe Hinata's history. As much as the village had changed over the past decade, no one had come close to changing as much as Hinata had. It was hard to believe she was ever the shy and retiring girl who rubbed her fingers together at the drop of a hat. While Anko was no stranger to pain and suffering, having assumed some of Morino Ibiki's roles when he was severely injured during one attack on the village, she did not relish seeing it in friends and comrades. Hyuga Hinata had gone through many changes, trying to catch the eye of a man who was too clueless to realize the reason for her transformation. It's really a tragic story, Ichigawa said in a hushed voice. She's in love with a great man, one who hardly knows that she's alive. He swallowed hard and stopped, seeing the look on Anko's face. The crowd thinned as everyone hurried to take their seats. Finally catching sight of Anko, Kurenai walked over to have a word with her. Have you seen Hinata? No, Anko answered. We were just talking about her. Do you have some reason to suspect trouble, too? She scanned the room. If there were any Anbu members present, even her trained eye could not pick them out. You know the history that she and Suzuka have. Kurenai frowned. Hinata is not about to let that kind of thing slide. No matter how much time passes. She caught sight of other Junin hanging around the fringes of the room. Keep a sharp eye out. I'm going to speak with some of the others. Look, there he is. Apot looked pointed. I see him. She waved her arm, but got no signal in return. I want to meet him. Anko glanced over to where the other girl indicated. She coughed, seeing who it was. Closing her eyes, she smiled. When it rained, it poured. She had set her sights on Uzumaki Naruto. Isn't he wonderful? Apot used a paper fan on herself, blushing. I have to know his name. Why tell me that he's next in line to be Hokage? She frowned. But, who is that he is sitting with? That would be Yukinai Makazuki, a woman from a rather wealthy family. Anko looked like she had bitten into something exceedingly sour. She's also a Junin-level ninja. But unlike most of us, she had made it a habit to use politics to her own advantage. For some reason, the clans had gotten behind the Akazuki family. putting a lot of pressure on Tsunade to grant the woman command of troops, even though she and her relatives were relative newcomers to the village. The play, the play, the play. The crowd was becoming rather vocal, chanting as one. Their concerted shouts were followed by loud raps from off stage. That had everyone beginning to quiet down. The huge maroon curtains opened. Masked violins and viola began to play. Additional vendors were given permission to walk the crowd. Dressed in foppish finery, the owner of the theater walked out and played to the crowd. He extolled his own virtues, while flattering his wealthiest patrons, and extolling the brilliance of the coming production. Suzuka, dressed as a shepherdess, was visibly waiting in the wings, ready to make her entrance. Hearing her cue, she walked out, and then began her opening speech. A number of young men whistled and made wolf calls. Cut flowers rained down on stage, thrown from groups of admirers. Members of the audience called out their praise, or added their applause to that of their fellow show-goers. Suddenly, a voice from the crowd cried out, "Haven't I ordered you off the stage for a month, you wretched creature?" While the identity of the speaker was not readily apparent, there were those in attendance who knew exactly who it was. Kurenai ran to gather the Junin together. Anko moved a pot to a place that was out easier to keep an eye on. The voice was Hinata's. There was no telling what might take place. Kurenai looked up at the largest balcony the theater offered. It was crowded with obvious guards, and a small lantern over it was lit. Those were clear signs that the Hokage was present for this show. That could make things even more complicated, should some kind of disturbance break out. Suzuka made several attempts to begin her lines, but the heckling speaker continues to interrupt her. If you do so poorly in your impromptu skits at Ichigawa's bakery, what makes you think you will do any better on stage, in front of so many people? Hinata stood on her chair, and her appearance caused quite a stir amongst the audience. Shit. Anko didn't know whether to curse or to applaud. Where did you go wrong training that one, Kurenai? The other Junin had walked up, joined by Asuna, Kakashi, Guy, Yugao, and a handful of other noteworthy ninjas. Kurenai scowled. I didn't. She turned out rather well, I think. She wrinkled up her nose. In most ways. Apot watched, hands clutched at her breast, eyes sharp and keen. Suzuka called out entreaties to the assembled patrons, asking for assistance. A rather large shinobi visiting from the village of Hidden Mist responded. He was joined by a number of his countrymen, all of whom sauntered up to the stage, blowing beeps to Suzuka. How wonderful it is to have true patrons of the art here, Suzuka said, bowing to her gallant supporters. Unlike many others, they are not swayed by threats and family names. She smirked, and then made a mocking bow in Hinata's direction. We don't take kindly to anyone who would threaten Miss Suzuka. One of the ninjas from the mist called out. We'll stand up for her honor. If no one else here had the courage to do so. That's right, one of his fellow shinobi said. I suggest you remove yourself from her presence, before someone sees fit to do it for you. His challenge brought cheers and jeers from the crowd. The visitors obviously didn't know who they were dealing with. Suzuka strutted about happily, looking as if she had just been named the greatest thespian in Konoha history. Her smile brightened, when more allied ninjas called out their support. She didn't care that they were siding with her merely because she was the star of the show. Anything that brought shame and dishonor down on Hyuga Hinata was fine with her. Anko, Kune, and the others passed hand signals to other Junins posted about the vast room. Each was prepared to work whatever jutsus were necessary to keep things under control. The last thing they needed was some kind of diplomatic nightmare. Oh my, Hinata replied. Gentlemen, please. I ask you as humanitarians, to have pity on my poor sword. She slapped her hand against a well-worn sheath. If you don't stop your buffoonery and shouting, you'll frighten the poor thing out of its scabbard. She put her hands on her hips after making a grand gesture with her hand. The crowd gasped. Everyone stood, trying to see what was taking place. Numerous people began pushing towards the front. Ushers and guards had their hands full, trying to prevent a mob scene. Instead, if you visitors to our fine village feel a need to demonstrate the honor of your warriors by rushing to the aid of a worthless snippet pretending to be an actress, I will take down your names, and fight you one after another, if that is what you want. Hinata glanced at one particular seat in the crowd, sighing briefly before turning back to the Mist Shinobi. But, I would suggest that we save such sport for outside, where there is much more room, and the stench of second-rate talent will not impede our game. The visiting ninjas looked at one another, some of them reaching for kunai and shuriken. The highest-ranking member of their group put his hand over the hilt of one man's sword, trying to keep things in check. The Mizukage would have their hides if they became embroiled in any kind of roughhousing that embarrassed their village. There were far too many witnesses, including the Hokage. But, if the opportunity provided itself later, a clandestine approach might provide them with some modicum of satisfaction. Well, Suzuka, it seems your champions have deemed you unworthy of their attention after all. Hinata smiled as the boisterous men acted more like sheep, returning quietly to their seats. You have to the count of 3 to leave the stage. Hinata turned to face the ninja-turned-actress. 1. Suzuka fled. The crowd was in a tumult. People whistled. Others shouted. Many spoke in angry, disgruntled voices. Why is everyone so upset? Hinata spoke, quieting the audience for a moment. Suzuka is a terrible actress. What's more, she had a hand in writing this play, so it can't be particularly enjoyable, either. Your time would be better spent simply enjoying the refreshments, and talking with your companions. The flamboyantly dressed manager of the theater ran over to confront Hinata, waving his arms in frantic fashion. My play, how can it go on without Suzuka? It can't. He turned and looked up at the Hokage's box, hoping to hear some kind of official statement. None was forthcoming. I will lose all of the money I invested. How am I going to cover my losses? You must have heard my decree to that miserable excuse for an actress. Hinata said, speaking loudly to be heard over the crowd. Yet, you insisted on putting on your so-called play. You took a risk and failed. Hinata ran a hand through her long indigo-colored hair, glancing over at Naruto for an instant. She frowned, seeing who was laying her head upon his shoulder. B minus, the foppish man was sputtering in embarrassment and outrage. But, he knew that if he took things too far and incited the crowd, his building would stand a good chance of getting severely damaged. Since I am a shinobi of the leaf, and a woman with honor, I will own up to my part. Hinata took a pouch from her belt and tossed it to the manager. The purse was filled with gold coins. A troublemaker in civilian-style robes stormed through the crowd, knocking people aside and trampling on the feet of those who wouldn't move. Oi, villain, Suzuka has a powerful patron. You will be sorry, braggart. You can't just buy everyone's favor with a handful of coins. Hinata looked the man up and down, coming to the easy conclusion that he was a lapdog and a popinjay. Well, sir, if sir it is, a fair number of people in the crowd began to snicker or whistle. The fidgety man was not well liked in most circles. I don't need to hide behind a patron. I'm quite capable of protecting myself with my sword. She chuckled when the man fidgeted. Do you wish to test my talent? The man quickly disappeared back from whence he came. A voice in the crowd called out. The crowd stopped in their growing unease to listen. The speaker continued on, knowing she had everyone's attention. That woman is rather tiresome, is she not, Naruto? It was Yukonime Akazuki. Naruto didn't answer. While he managed to keep his trademark smile on his face, he did not say. Very pleased at his companion's words. Shrugging, he looked up at Hinata. He gave her a quick and subtle salute. Obviously, Naruto did not have strong affections for the woman trying to impress him. That had Hinata feeling a strong sense of relief. But, Konohamaru, in the first blush of adulthood, loved Yukonime from afar. He looked over at Naruto and clenched his teeth. His friend had the go-den opportunity to consort with an angel, but seemed unwilling to stand up for her. He would do it then. You there. Konohamaru shouted to Hinata. I hope you are proud of your tiresome behavior. He looked down at Yukonime, hoping to see a look of approval on her face. If my grandfather were alive today, he'd let you know that you were a disgrace to our village. Hinata ignored him, pulling at a thread on her blouse. I'm speaking to you, Hyuga Hinata. Konohamaru hated to be ignored. He was the grandson of a Hokage. While you are small and short, I am certain your ears must be large enough to work. Do I have to kneel and put myself at the level of those ears? He hoped to goad her into a fight. He too had taken to wearing a sword, seeing that they were now in fashion. I see, Hinata said, yawning. The grandson of a great man wishes to win the affections of a woman who does not deserve it. She shook her head. Well, if you want to impress women, you young hothead, you should at least come up with better insults. Hinata took out her handkerchief and wiped her nose. You could have shouted, "Avast ye, you white-eyed freak." That would have some old world charm. Or, perhaps, you plain-faced rogue. Or, lovesick loser. Those would have some bite. Truly, you are lacking in wit and creativity. Hinata went on to offer a large number of better insults that she might have used in Konohamaru's situation. In not-so-subtle fashion continued to mock the young man, spurring him on. I challenge you, Konohamaru shouted. I challenge you here and now, in front of everyone. He looked over at Naruto. His friend seemed to have more notoriety than he wanted. But, no one ever gave much thought to a young man descended from one of the greatest leaders Konoha ever had. This might be a good start. Are you perchance talking about a duel? Hinata jumped down from her chair and sauntered over to where Konohamaru stood with his group of cronies. That kind of thing does seem to be big amongst certain groups now. Quote, not the kind of groups that would have you as a member, Konohamaru said, despite seeing a look of disapproval on Naruto's face. He looked over at Udon and Moegi, who also seemed somewhat displeased. The crowd sounded like it was behind him. At least, that's how he chose to interpret the sense of anticipation that he sensed. Shouldn't you put a stop to this kind of thing? Apod asked Anko. I doubt that a man as wonderful as he is would want to watch this kind of thing. She looked over at Naruto again. The customers paid for a show, Anko said, smiling. She had a great sense of anticipation herself. And, if that young man is going to shoot his mouth off like that, he deserves whatever he gets. He's not in any physical danger. Naruto is friend to both of them. Kakashi mentioned. I doubt he would let things get to a point that put either at significant risk. He took out his Ika Ika book. But, it doesn't hurt to have medical ninjas in the house. He had been speaking with Sakura and Shizune earlier. This should be stopped immediately. He is the grandson of a former Hokage. Ebisu's comment was quickly talked down by the other Junin. Shhhhhhhh, I want to hear what she has to say. Kurenai looked up at the Hokage's balcony. There was no sign whatsoever. Tsunade obviously saw fit to let things unfold as they were. If you're so set on proving yourself, then I guess I should give you your duel. Hinata turned to the crowd. Is that all right with the rest of you? The response was near deafening. To make up for the play they'll miss, I believe that I will create a poem as we go along. You don't mind, do you? That was directed to Konohamaru. Do whatever you want, Konohamaru said, taking out his sword. But, don't use it as an excuse when I beat you. Of course not, Hinata replied, bowing. The crowd went silent. Everyone was sitting on the edge of their seats. Lesser plays were a dime a dozen. But, an event like this could be talked about forever. With a grand flourish, Hinata drew her blade and called Konohamaru to meet her, beginning the duel. Before long, it became quite evident that the young man was in no way Hinata's equal. Her skill was breathtaking, while his was adequate at best. The duel in Hotel of Fukoku fought, by Hyuga and a good for naught, Hinata laughed as she sliced through the sash on her opponent's robe. What is that nonsense? Konohamaru asked, embarrassed and angry. Why, the title of my poem, of course. I hope someone writes it down. My memory fails me these days. Hinata flipped her sword through a swift flourish. The poem would be all over town by the morning. She was certain of that. The crowd began hooting, shouting, and clapping. People were climbing up on others' shoulders to see. In all of the great boxes lining the sides of the immense and old hall, patrons leaned over the edges, wanting a glimpse of the spectacle unfolding before them. A troop of ninja moved towards the front of the stage. A number of Anbu were there, not surprised to see their commander up on the stage. Hinata had told them of her intentions. They might not be able to guess who she might get in a tussle with, but there was little doubt that someone would call her out. Hold a minute, Hinata held up her hand. What, ready to surrender? Konohamaru's rushed question sent titters throughout the audience. No, I must think of my lines, and the moves that match. Be patient, your defeat will come soon enough. Hinata walked back and forth a moment, her eyes closed, then nodded her head. I have them. She took up her fighting stance. I primly bow long and low, and, freeing hand and heel, my heavy mantle off I throw, and I draw my polished steel, graceful as a future Hokage. Round I wheel, alert as a fox and such, alert as a fox and such, at the stanza's end, I touch. The two combatants engaged, Hinata smiling at the humor of the moment, and Konohama Ru filled with determination to win favor. Hinata continued with her rollicking poem. Better for you had you lain low, where stabs my blade. In the heel, in the heart, or your sliced ribbon below. In the hip, and make you kneel. In the hip, and make you kneel. What next? A hit? Not much. It will be on the ear, the strike I steal, when, at the stanza, I touch. Konohamaru fought fiercely, grunting and sweating. His pride was stung, hearing Hinata make light of him. With each effortless parry the woman made, his temper grew. Noticing that, Hinata grinned, happy to lessen the young upstart. For that alone, this night would prove worthwhile. She resumed her game. Oh, for a rhyme in O. You wriggle, so pale, young eel. A rhyme, a tarnished leaf badge you show. Ha, I, parry the point of your steel, the point you hope to make me feel. I've found a line, now clutch, you'll be split, Sir Sycophant, so save your zeal. At the stanza's end, I touch. Panting, Konohama Ru shouted for Hinata to keep those words to herself. He was not done yet. The fight was far from over. Hinata shook her head and spoke in a solemn tone. Blind fool, pray heaven for your soul's weal. I move apace, yes, such, and such. Cut over. Hinata found the line she wanted, having an easy series of moves to reach her target. She moved, quickly, faint. Her sword flashed out, notching Konohamaru's ear with a shallow cut. What ho, you reel. Konohamaru staggered backwards, shocked that he had been wounded. Hinata brought up her sword in salute. At the stanza's end, I touched. She bowed. Acclamations rang out, filling the great room with a thunderous wave of noise. The applause in the gentry boxes was drowned out by the whistling and cheering crowd. Flowers and handkerchiefs were thrown on stage, as were kunai with colored ribbons. The Anbu members flashed out of view then back into sight, surrounding Hinata and congratulating her. Mr. Ichigawa danced about happily, saying that there would be bean paste-filled buns for all of Hinata's friends. Kurenai was glad to see Hinata victorious, as Konohamaru had become rather stuck up and ill-behaved of late. But, she worried that the white-eyed girl's behavior would make her political enemies. She went and told her as much. Well, what's wrong with that? Hinata asked, bowing to the many well-wishers who clustered at the edge of the stage. At least I'm getting attention, right? Her crooked smile showed her current happiness, but also gave mute evidence of the loneliness she felt inside. Family servants of Yukonai Makazuki rushed up to help Konohamaru, who was holding a bloody hand to his ear. Looking out at the crowd, and hearing its obvious opinion, the young ninja hung his head, feeling the fool. Did you do this because Naruto was in the audience? Kurenai spoke quietly, close to Hinata's ear. I know you dislike Suzuka, but this was all a bit much, even for you. I still have a lot of insecurities about my height, that's all. Hinata joked. Looking over at Naruto again, she sighed, her eyes losing their sparkle. I hate Suzuka, that's no secret. She bit her lip, then continued. It's not just because she's a jerk and a terrible actress. She tried to seduce Naruto once. When she failed, she accused him of rape, Kurenai said, squeezing her friend's hand. I heard the tale. It may have been kept quiet, Hinata said, her face growing red with anger. But it hurt him dearly. Having his character questioned, she clenched her fists. He refused to do anything to her. That's just the kind of man he is. You still haven't professed your love for him, have you? Kurenai's eyes were stern and businesslike. That's hard to believe, seeing how self-assured you've become. She pursed her lips. Are you afraid of rejection? Quote, yes. Hinata's voice caught in her throat. But only from him. She swiped her sword at the nearest curtain, putting a long tear in it. I can't believe that he never caught on. He's such an idiot. She hung her head. No. Who's the idiot? Maybe I set my hopes too high. Most people won't agree with you there, Kurenai said. Really? Hinata made a face. Well, most people would be wrong. He gets stronger every day. Look how handsome he is, after starting out so short and scruffy, just like me. Time has not been as kind to me as it has to him. She looked up at the arched ceiling. Then down at her feet. How can I approach him? Kurenai just shook her head. You need to look in a mirror more often, Hinata. You may be short, but you're beautiful. In ways that the strumpets who chase after him will never be able to match. The older Kunoichi waved her arm, drawing attention to a group of giggling girls in brightly colored gowns. Their clothen, G revealed more than was commonly thought proper. You could dress and act like them. Instead, you have stayed true to yourself. A messenger walked over to Hinata, a scroll in his hand. Bowing, he handed it to her and left. Who's it from? Kurenai asked. Him, Hinata said, suddenly looking timid, like she did in her younger says. Naruto. Hinata opened the parchment and read. He wants to meet with me tomorrow. At Ichigawa's shop. Alone. Kurenai raised an eyebrow. Hinata's face opened up like a bud just beginning to bloom. Could Naruto have been impressed by her actions? Did he have feelings for her that he wanted to admit? She felt giddy. No, not simply giddy. Nervous. 7 o'clock, she whispered. That was shortly after the bakery opened. Enko returned, looking somewhat grim. We have a problem brewing, she said loudly. What's wrong? Hinata signaled her Anbu squad members to gather round. Someone has been trying to set up a small riot. They have been inciting the patrons who came to see the play and were seriously disappointed. Word is, they plan to blame everything on you. She made a fierce face. The patrons in question are all soldiers. Some are guests from foreign lands, quartering here in advance of the coming battle. Most of them have had too much to drink, it seems. This could get real ugly real fast. Hinata tugged at her hair, looking serious. Soldiers, huh? Like many of her fellow Junin, Hinata resented the need for warriors who had not been trained in the way of ninjutsu. But, she had to admit that Konoha's defense came first. And it took a lot less time to teach a man to be a soldier than it did to train shinobi. They should be worried about keeping the peace, not fighting with shinobi. Kurenai's eyes flashed. This kind of affront to the honor of our great village cannot be allowed to stand. Guy looked might unhappy. Next to him, Asuna took a long puff on his cigarette and smiled. We should probably take care of things before Naruto catches wind. Kakashi put away his book. He still tends to be a bit impulsive at times. Anbu can handle it, Yugao said. Especially if we combine our squads. No, Hinata said, shaking her head. Since my name was brought up, I feel a need to take a hand in things. She swished her sword about in dramatic fashion. I would appreciate NY efforts at keeping things from getting out of hand. Her father wouldn't like it very much, if her name was connected with street brawling again. Too bad. You probably have a few new jutsus you want to try out, too. Kurenai looked Hinata in the eyes. Right, Hinata shrugged. I was meek for so long. I'm just making up for lost time. There's no stopping her when she's in one of those moods, Yugao said to Anko. Good, Anko said. She took out a kunai and licked it. We'd better make certain to come along too, Genma said, long toothpick held between his teeth. Katetsu, Azumo, and Iwashi nodded assent. Someone has to look out for the safety of the soldiers, Kakashi quipped. Honey buns and broken hearts. The morning sun peeked out from behind a group of persistent clouds. Birds darted here and there, flying low through the streets of Konoha, landing in great numbers outside of the bakery. The workers always threw the crumbs from yesterday's bread to their feathered fans. Ichigawa's establishment bustled with activity as he and his many cooks worked to prepare the day's pastries and loaves. Obsessed with poetry, the old man has written down all of his recipes in the form of poems and sonnets. The other bakers recited that verse as they sifted, measured, and rolled. One inventive young woman handed Ichigawa a large pastry in the shape of a lyre. That had him praising her efforts in flowery words. An older man's work clearly resembled a violin. His son's creations called to mind swords and shields. Like their employer, the cooks were all avid patrons of the arts. Ichigawa's young wife Sada entered. Furious, an angry look on her face. Again, like a fool, you have given away baked goods to poets in return for their verses. You stupid old nincompoop, How are we supposed to become rich that way? Flouncing her way over to her husband, she showed him a large stack of paper bags that she had made for the shop. What have you done? The flour-covered man's eyes went wide. His hands trembled. The bags had been made from countless poets' manuscripts and other unique and original works of his patrons. Mister, I would like 2 jam tarts, please. A cute young girl walked up. Her toddler brother clinging to her leg. 1 for me and 1 for my brother. She beeped on one finger. Yes, of course. Ichigawa selected the 2 largest pastries, but had to sort through all the bags. Trying to find a poem that he could part with. Tossing her hair, Sada stomped out of sight. Hinata walked into the shop, looking very nervous. She wore her sword on the wrong side. Even though she usually eschewed the use of cosmetics, her makeup had obviously taken her a great deal of time to apply. Just the same, she had forgotten eyeliner under one eye. Jumpy, she nearly drew her sword when Sada comes out again. Miss Hyuga, it's good to see you here again. What happened to your hand? The woman looked at Hinata's left hand, wrapped with bandages. I do not wish to speak about it. Hinata answered. She peered out the window, looking for any sign of Naruto. Sada was not one of her favorite people. She had heard rumors that left her cold inside. The Baker's wife lost interest when a handsome young soldier arrived, telling the assembling group of poets and musicians that he was Sada's friend. Hinata spared him a quick look of suspicion, before fluttering her hands. Looking once more for any sign of Naruto. The customers all used fanciful and poetic phrases to describe their joy at the food they purchased. That had Ichigawa beaming and singing a short happy song. When he left to bring out more supplies, Hinata's eyes narrowed as she watched Sada's behavior. Naruto or not, she needed to shift her attention and say something. Sada, I think now that you know that Ichigawa is a friend of mine. Hinata saw the soldier looking her over. Obviously, he did not know who she was. Otherwise, he wouldn't be smirking. He is a generous man with a heart too big for his body. I will not tolerate his being trifled with. I would say that if his wife were having an affair with a young soldier, it would be best for her to stop. Sada blushed, then looked around. Afraid that Hinata had been overheard, she looked over to the soldier, almost hoping he would stand up for her honor. Hinata still hadn't gotten her anger at Sasuke out of her system, despite the events of the prior evening. Do you have something to say, sir? The way that Hinata drawled that last word was a clear indication of her opinion of the man. The soldier smiled. He was no doubt about to make some grand remark, trying to impress his paramour. Frantically, Sada stepped hard on his foot and shook her head. Pity, whatever Hinata might have wanted to say died on her tongue. The bell on the front door rang. The clustered artist stepped aside quickly. Naruto strode into the shop. Overcome with an intense rush of emotion, Hinata nearly knocked over a chair. Buying pastries for everyone standing at the counter, she quickly asked them leave the shop. She didn't want a crowd of people in the shop at a time like this. Hinata, those pastries look very good. Would you like some? And some tea? Naruto's rich and vibrant voice had Hinata close to swooning. She steadied herself. This was ridiculous. She was an adult now, not some cowering weirdo, hiding behind a training post. Well, yes, that would be wonderful. Her words were rushed, but punctuated by pauses. Her heart was beating faster than ever before. Here, let's sit. They'll bring us out one of everything. He pulled out a chair for Hinata, and then placed his order with Ichigawa. Don't let anyone say that Uzumaki Naruto is not generous with his friends. He sat next to her at the rear corner table. They were in the most secluded part of the shop, Hinata noticed. Maybe her hopes were reasonable after all. When the food and drink arrived, Naruto took a sip of tea, and then raised one eyebrow. That was quite a performance. Last night, yes. Hinata swallowed hard, and then pinched herself hard in the leg. She willed herself to be calm. I had warned Suzuka not to. She was interrupted. That was rather unexpected in itself, Naruto said, grinning. But I'm talking about the skirmish in the streets that followed. The blonde-haired young man drummed his fingers on the table. Things had grown larger than the perpetrator must have intended, but things quieted down rather fast. Fast and forcefully, I would say. Hinata nodded. No doubt Naruto had heard how she Had taken on one troop of drunken soldiers single-handedly, sending many to the stockade to dry out, but landing no small number in the infirmary. All I can say is, people change. Naruto smiled, thinking how much he had changed. His worries about being accepted were long gone. His secret out, he had faced hard times, until he finished off Akatsuki once and for all, saving the village in the process. Some grow very beautiful. Oh. Hinata brought a hand to her mouth, blushing. She stared at Naruto for a while, something she still did when time and her duties still allowed. The opportunities grew less frequent every year. Yes, things have certainly changed. Naruto finished his pastries, and pointed out of the window. Hinata looked, then caught his hand when he tried to sneak one of hers. Why are you here? What did you want to speak to me about? Hinata fought hard to control her breathing. Naruto ignored the question. Leaning back in his chair, he reminisced about the childhood the two of them had shared, mentioning their time in school together and her bravery in the Chunin exams. Seeing Hinata's hand, he asks for her to show it to him. Reluctantly, Hinata unwrapped the bandages. That's a rather nasty-looking cut. You should have gone to the medical center for treatment. Here, this time I have the medicinal cream. Don't you dare pull that hand away. Naruto began ministering to Hinata's wound. I have a number of immobilizing jutsus. The feel of Naruto's warm hand on hers had Hinata smiling, until she caught herself. She was blushing furiously. It had to stop. She was acting like some blasted school girl, or one of the strumpets at the aborted play. So, how many was it this time, Hinata? Naruto looked up into her eyes. And what was the reason for your recklessness? It was only 30, Hinata replied, not wanting to reply to the second part of Naruto's query. I see, Naruto said, examining Hinata's face. No big deal then, right? His voice had a curious character to it. Straight ahead. Into battle. Let no one stand in our path. He stared at her face for a moment. That's our ninja way, isn't it? Yes. Hinata looked deep into Naruto's eyes, trying to tell him so much with that single word. After that, the two of them spoke quietly of their recent duties, until Naruto sighed and pushed his cup away from him. I'm in love with someone, he admitted suddenly, rubbing his head. Putting one hand behind his head, he continued, looking down at the table. She doesn't know that I've fallen for her. Hinata almost fell off of her seat. Was Naruto making a confession of love to her? Had that big idiot finally realized how much she cared for him? She is so beautiful. Naruto looked out the window, rubbing his chin. So slender, and just a touch taller than me. That had Hinata's heart falling like a broken bucket down an old dusty well. It couldn't be her. Naruto was taller than she was now. Her name is a pot, Naruto said, not meeting Hinata's gaze. I met her last night after the duel. It's funny how lightning can strike out of the blue. Hinata barely managed a nod. Part of her was destitute, wanting to turn to dust and fall between the cracks in the floor. It just wasn't fair. She had been watching Naruto forever, and some woman captures his heart in a single night. She's here from the waterfall as an envoy. Naruto tugged at one ear. She was sent to see how we think and how we fight. These days, we can use any ally we can get, no matter how small. He scratched his neck. It wouldn't hurt if they could spare some hero water. Hinata looked down in her lap. The word, small, rang in her ears. What she wouldn't give to be slender and tall. If only there was a water that would gift her with beauty enough to catch Naruto's eye. And, as coincidence will have it, she will be assigned to your company. Naruto watched Hinata's face. He was impressed that she managed to hide most of her shock. I'm a bit worried, because she seems so timid, and your group is a rowdy lot. Some of them have gotten into a fracas or two with foreigners before. So, as a personal favor, I would ask you to watch over her. Hinata sat straighter, the professional in her taking over. Yes, I can do that then. Is there anything else? She was proud of herself at that moment. There was no sign of pain in her voice. Naruto nodded his head. I'm not much of a man with the ladies. His words almost had Hinata shouting out how she felt then and there. Was that ever an understatement? But, I would very much like to meet with her again. Maybe you could get her to write to me. Hinata sat quietly a moment. The world seemed so unfair at times. She waved her hand and said, "Sure." Naruto smiled. Standing up, he left money on the table. "I knew I could trust in you, Hinata." "Of course. I have always." Hinata clenched her fists. Things almost slipped out there. "I have always held you in the highest regard, Naruto. You should know that." Her inner voice screamed, "You should know so much more than that." "Thank you." With that, Naruto left. The bell on the shop rang once as Naruto walked out, but soon began ringing nearly continuously as members of her Anbu squad and their trainees flocked to her. Some of them were anxious to know how things had gone with Naruto. Most were excited about the events of the previous evening. The whole village was talking about the poetic duel. But that was not all. Quite a few people were spreading news of the fight that took place afterwards. Her friends were glad to see that someone had stood up and put the soldiers in their place. The younger shinobi were awestruck, hearing how many rabble-rousers Hinata had taken down herself. "Come on outside, Hinata." Ten pointed out through the bakery window. "There are a large number of people who want to congratulate you on your victory." As the second-ranking ninja in their Anbu squad, and as the other girl's friend, she felt entitled to what she asked next. "Did you have another victory this morning?" Hinata shook her head sadly. She wasn't in the mood to go outside and carouse. "I'm sorry," Ten said, sighing. "Don't give up hope. It took a long time for me to get through to your cousin. She and Neji were engaged. It looks like they will all be coming to see you, then." Countless well-wishers began making their way into the shop. The bakers pushed into the throng, happily taking order after order. They were particularly glad to see the wealthy men who had stopped by to see Hinata. They bought large numbers of pastries as they waited to speak with her, wanting to ask the famous young woman to train their personal guards, or to see if she would perform for their personal gatherings. It was quite a scene. But Hinata was not hungry for attention that morning. Not anymore. The one person whose attention she craved had walked away, leaving her heart shattered. Like a mirror struck by the gentle fist. "Hinata." Ten tapped her kunai on the table. "This is a good opportunity for you." She paused, catching sight of someone. Damn. Hinata began to scowl. She had caught sight of the same person. Yukinai Makazuki had made her way into the shop, and was heading her way. "Hinata. Dearest." The taller and older woman smiled a crocodile smile when she stepped up to the table. "Quite a performance from you last night, in many ways, if I hear correctly." Hinata looked up at the woman, and then nodded, saying nothing. The woman had called her out during the almost play, trying to curry favor with Naruto, and now she was all smiles, talking as if they were childhood friends. "You need not be modest. Not one of the Hyuga, our village's foremost family." There was no doubt that Yukinai did not like that last fact one bit. "Is Konohamaru all right?" Hinata asked, running her hand over the bandage Naruto had put on. That young nothing. I don't see how it matters. Of course he is fine, since it was the tiniest of wounds." Hinata put on her own false smile. Of course. So many people are beneath your notice, I suppose. Whatever shall we do with the lot of them?" Ten was standing behind the higher-ranking ninja, trying to get Hinata to stop. Hinata ignored her. "Yes. Yukihime picked up one of the uneaten pastries and took a dainty nibble. "As you may know, my uncle has become one of the top elders in Konoha. He may be willing to help one such as you. Your wit could carry you far. I thank you for your kind offer. But I have no need for anyone's help." Hinata shrugged, smiling a true smile. She knew what kind of cost such help would bring with it. Hyuga Hinata was no one's trained falcon or performing monkey. Yukihime had a rather dark look in her eyes, but maintained her tranquil appearance. Her fingernails gouged into the hapless pastry. At that moment, one of the Anbu members pushed his way through the crowd. He was laughing, his arm full of hats and weapons. "Squad leader, look what we have here." He was followed by other members of the company, their arms full too. Hats, swords, and pouches from the 30 men. There was no need to mention what 30 men. The look on Yukihime's face soured. One of the men mentioned that some of the troublemakers had been shinobi of the mist, and had been seen speaking to a leaf ninja of some note. "Who?" Hinata asked the man, who only then saw who was standing near his captain. The man glanced at Yukihime, but said nothing. I spoke to our friends from the mist. Yukihime admitted. They were of a similar mind as me. She smiled, her eyes flashing. Generous men. They offered money to other men in need. Funny, but I have that some of the 30 were among those treated so charitably. She picked up one of the hats, looked at it for a moment, and then tossed it on Hinata's lap. With that, she marched out of the shop, her personal servants pushing ahead of her, manhandling the crowd. Everyone around Hinata's table spoke in hushed but excited voices. Who could know what that confrontation might bring about someday? The crowd gradually thinned out, until only Hinata, 1010, their ambush squad, and the bakers remained inside the shop. Looking outside of the window, Hinata saw a runner leading a few shinobi to the gathering of troops. New to the company that she and the others were loosely assigned to. The soldiers and their ninja brethren would be heading out on a mission together. I really worry about you sometimes, do you know that? 1010 looked exasperated. It's one thing to put your status as Anbu team leader at risk. While the elders might look at you cross-eyed, anyone bringing complaint to Suand would leave with their tail between their legs. The slender ninja worried at her hair. But, you find so much joy in your acting. There's no way you can be a successful actress, or even get any parts within the village walls, if you keep angering influential people. Hinata put her hands on the table, spread her fingers wide, then looked down at her nails. I have no interest in King friends of unworthy men, or women. Hinata looked at the window, imaging Naruto's face in the reflection. There was only one man she had ever really been interested in. He was too worthy for her own good. It's not my ninja way to beep up to people who are more worried about their careers and reputation than they are about the leaf. Suddenly, accompanied by a number of men looking to win her notice, a pot burst into the shop. Where is our captain? I'm here to report. While she could not be a member of Ansatsu Senjutsu Tokushu Butai, there were other ninjas assigned to the company. And she would be amongst them. The leaf shinobi poked fun at the foreigner in their midst, but in a light-hearted and spirited way. Apot did not take the shenanigans well at all, and had even drawn a weapon. A number of the men pointedly told her to be certain not to make fun of Hyuga Hinata's height, witness the events of the night before. 1010 took the new recruit's name, then passed it along to Hinata. To her credit, the white-eyed girl did not flinch or sigh. The two of them overheard Apot jawing with the Anbu squad members, and swapping words with ninja recruits and trainees. She was not merely a shy sweet girl. So, what should I do? Apot walked over and asked 1010. What should I do when your leaf shinobi grow too boastful at my expense? You should do at should any respectable ninja would do. 1010 twirled a kunai around one finger. You should show them that a ninja can be from the waterfall, and still have courage. You should show them that you won't back down from them. Or from anything. That is what I would do. Apot looked over at Hinata, and then narrowed her eyes. She knew just what she could do to show her courage to these leaf soldiers and shinobi. Captain, tell us about last night. Was it really 100 men? One of the newer additions to the squad called out. Soon everyone else was clamoring for the story from Hinata's own lips. Hinata knew they would be crowding the bakery all morning, if she didn't tell them something. Okay, settle down you louts. You all know me, as meek as I was when I was a genin. That had a number of men and women guffawing. One new voice trilled with laughter. Oh yes, our little Hinata. It was Ino. She had walked in a few moments earlier. You assigned to my little family too, Ino? Hinata asked, a smile on her face. Or are you just here for some hot cross buns? Sure. That's it. Ino laughed. I eat those buns. They go to my buns. She patted a rump that couldn't be any better in shape and size. Seriously, though, they gave me a choice of assignments, and this one sounded best. Tamari and Kankoro have teamed up with Shikamaru and his group. Choji won't be out of the hospital for a while. He used those stupid pills again. Asuma has been sent out on a covert strike. I see, Hinata said, grinning. We're just table scraps, are we? She pointed to a chair. Pull up a seat. I'll tell you and the others the tale. As I was saying, I usually don't have much of a temper. Someone whistled, and then ducked down. The streets were rather nasty, and it looked like the rabble-rousers were spreading out into the shop district. There are too many livelihoods tied up there, and too many temptations for drunken sots. Did someone have to put you up on their shoulders, so that you could see all that? That was a pot. Hinata put her hand on her weapons bag, but shook her head. She had promised Naruto to take care of the visiting ninja. She ignored her. I came across a group of 30 men, some of whom were soldiers and shinobi from the mist. They were hassling a number of village women, urinating in the street, and defacing personal property. When I walked up to talk to the one who had acted like the leader at the Fukoku, he had no idea where the voice was coming from. He probably checked the bottom of his boot. It was a pot again. Ten reached for her weapons scroll. Ino began working hand seals. A look from Hinata had them stopping what they were doing. The other shinobi, and the soldiers who had come inside, were muttering angrily amongst themselves. Did someone hear a lost puppy yapping? Hinata's question had everyone laughing. A pot began turning red in the face. It seems that I better go with the abridged edition, or we might be here all day. Those words had everyone but a pot laughing or chuckling. Kaden is rather useful at clearing a tight pack crowd. It is not much good, however, at getting men down from a roof or the top of lamp post. Hinata smiled. Kaden was precisely the reason the men landed where they had. And, I'm afraid that the name Gentle Fist is a bit of a misnomer. When there was only one man left standing. What? They all sat, so as to see you eye to eye. That was rather mannerly for a drunken rabble. A pot stood with her hands on her hips. Folks, I would like everyone but our new squad mate to leave the room. Hinata stood up and brushed off some crumbs. A pot, you will remain behind. Everyone left after that, placing bets on what would happen. One would wondered if they would have to mail the new girl home. Hinata walked over slowly to a pot, staring her down. The girl flinched at first, but then stuck out her chin and clenched her fists. That had Hinata's opinion of her improving somewhat. Instead of striking a pot or dressing her down for speaking to a superior that way, Hinata shocked a pot by embracing her. So you are a pot, are you? I've heard about you from my cousin, Naruto. Hinata hoped that a pot wouldn't question anyone about that last lie. It seems that he is quite taken with you. He's asked that I keep an eye out for you. Really? A pot brought one hand up to his mouth. Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. I've been. Her eyes went very wide. Yes, Hinata replied. The Naruto. He asked me to tell you something. He'd very much like to hear from you while you're on this mission. He would like you to write to him. She swallowed, but kept her smile up. A pot shook her head. I can't do that. I'm terrible with words. She bit her lip. If I write to him, he'll lose all feelings for me. As soon as he reads my words. She sighed, nervously messing with her fancy hair. Well, Hinata was struck with an idea. I can write your letters for you, and you can sign your name and spray on your perfume. But, why? A pot looked taken aback by the offer. I think he really wants to like you, a lot. Those words had Hinata crying inside, but that was nothing new. And I would be glad to practice at my poetry and wit, to keep myself sharp. It would also be a way to speak her heart, even though Naruto would never know it. He would think that the words came from another. Okay, a pot said. Smiling brightly, she ran over and embraced Hinata again, just as a number of soldiers arrived, wanting to get their orders from Hinata. One was the young soldier who was smitten with Sada. Having watched from the doorway, and having heard how a pot had mocked Hinata's height without reprisal, he decided that he would take the same tack. Well, we meet again. The woman with all the kunai told me you'd be outside shortly. But, I guess any time you show up, it could be considered, shortly. The young man smirked, feeling like he was getting Hinata back for her treatment of Sada. Hinata stuck out her arm, pushing a pot out of the way. Before anyone knew what happened, she moved, striking the soldier hard in the chest. The young man rolled end over end, landing unconscious on the floor. A pot stood stunned, her mouth forming an O shape. Her thoughts were quite plainly written across her face. She had been playing with fire. Hinata looked at her and smiled. Balcony and borrowed words. The seasons changed. As the time passed, the latest war with the rain and grass grew from a series of escalating skirmishes to a full-fledged confrontation. War brought many changes, as did the weeks themselves. Ichigawa sat outside of Naruto's home, conversing with that ninja's aide. My wife Sada ran off with a soldier and all of our savings. The bakery is ruined. I tried to hang myself. But Hyuga Hinata found me, cut me down, and brought me here to work for Master Naruto. The aide commiserated, and checked his watch. He called for Naruto to come down. His boss was already overdue at a meeting with Jiraiya, and had another session scheduled with battle planners. Having grown into a promising strategist despite a lack of any true genius, his services were required in many settings. He'll get there in good time, I wager. Hinata smiled as she walked up. She accepted a beep on her hand from Ichigawa, even if it means blowing holes in any walls that get in his way. The disgruntled aide nodded his head, looking all the world like a pigeon. Just as long as it's not one of our walls again. There was obviously a story behind that, but the aide was determined to stay mum. No matter how often Hinata asked. A number of musicians arrived, breathless. Hinata won their services in a bet, having caught the head musician out on a point of bad grammar. Why, huff puff, did you, huff make us run, puff 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 all of the way here? One purpling violin player asked. To be blunt, you're all too damn fat. Hinata laughed at the look on their faces. Her words were only half in jest. That would be Ichigawa's fault, since his pastries were always so good, and the portions so generous. Ichigawa sighed. He served as a cook for Naruto, who allowed him to make pastries to hand out to artists and musicians. Things might change yet again, since the people he had treated so kindly over the years were eager to repay the favors. If fate smiled upon him, he would be able to reopen the bakery soon. You remember what I told you about my ninja way? Hinata looked the baker in the eyes. I've spoken through channels, and the soldier's wages will be garnished. That money will mysteriously make its way into your pocket. If he deserts, there will be a price on his head, and that will go to you, too. Thank you. Ichigawa brightened considerably. Sada may have stolen your savings, but there's more to life than money. Hinata's voice had threatened to crack there, but she held tough. The past few weeks had not been kind to her heart. Naruto and Appat spent a great deal of time together, whenever their separate missions allowed. Kurenai had been seriously wounded, but would recover fully. Both Shino and Kiba were missing, and had been for a few days now. She had asked to lead a team to find them, but her request had been denied. The musicians began to play. Ichigawa's face looked dreadful. The aide ran inside. Hinata held her tongue, horrified at how bad they sounded. She had never heard this troupe before, and understood why. Gentlemen, your tone is splendid today. Whatever you had for breakfast, please let me know. Hinata would be sure to avoid it like the plague. I am finally ready to assign you your task. There is a woman whose spirit is very low, even though she puts on a strong front. She may deny it, but she loves music more than life itself. Loath to accept charity, she may try to drive you away. She may even resort to lies, saying that you sound terrible. Hinata shook her head. Tisk tisk. But, the pride of a woman like that is a powerful thing. The head musician said, I ask you to serve her with all your heart. Wherever she goes, follow. Hinata struck a dramatic pose. Through doors, up trellises, from courtyard to courtyard if necessary. We will. The musicians all promised at once. Play for all you are worth, and as loudly as you can. Start when you first catch sight of her, and do not cease until the sun goes to bed. Hinata smiled, but not for the reason that the musicians thought. This woman's name, one musician asked. Suzuka. The famous actress Suzuka. I have her address for you. She's a ninja, so you may have to work to keep up with her. If you do, consider our bet complete. The musicians left, still huffing and puffing. What was that terrible noise? Naruto strode down his stairs, dressed in a pair of splendid robes. He smiled, seeing Hinata. Hey, Hinata, look at these robes. They're a gift from Appat. She says they make me look. Never mind. Hinata kept a smile on her face, but just barely. She knew just what Naruto was going to say. It was easy, as she thought the same thing herself, just looking at him. Speaking of Appat, Naruto motioned for Hinata to follow him to a private spot just around a vine-covered fence. I never cease to be amazed by her. The letters that she writes me are breathtaking. They are truly remarkable. I find it hard to believe. But I think she may even be more intellectual than you are. I see. Those letters must be quite splendid. Indeed, Hinata fought the urge to twiddle her fingers. Her heart was in free fall. She gathered up her strength, and continued putting on a good front. Well, I'll let you be the judge of that, Miss Poet. Naruto took out a letter, which he had kept in his robes over his heart at Apathy's request. With a grand flourish, he read passages from the correspondence. Hinata found herself whispering the words before Naruto spoke them, and then stopped when she caught herself. Those words truly touch my heart in a way I have never been touched before. I think I am falling deeply in love. Naruto's smile was a dagger in Hinata's breast. Ah, Hinata hadn't been able to find anything else to say. Well, she coughed, trying to find her normal voice. I'm certain that the poetry might seem wonderful to a novice. She began critiquing the work she had secretly done herself. It seems to me that a certain Anbu leader is jealous of Apathy's talent. Naruto laughed, and then stopped when his aide spoke. Sir, there is a carriage approaching. The aide twitched ever so slightly. Whose? Naruto frowned, certain he knew the answer. It is that of Yukinime Akazuki. The aide made a face. He didn't bother trying to hide his opinion of the imperious woman. I see. Thank you. Naruto turned to Hinata. We don't want any trouble here. Quick, over the fence and up the steps. You can stay inside until I see what she wants. He knew that Hinata and Yukihime mixed worse than oil and water. Feeling like a criminal of sorts, Hinata ran from the scene, heading up into Naruto's abode. Finding an ideal vantage point, she watched and listened. Herself unseen and unheard, she realized that she was laying on a cushion. It was Naruto's cushion. She took a deep breath, smelling his scent on it. Sir, the aide said. Why? Our meetings. Not only did he want to keep his boss on schedule, but he also saw a means by which he could escape yet another encounter with that blasted woman. Have been postponed until later, Naruto said, showing the aide a recent communique. Our visitor is unaware of the meetings, or their delay. His smile had the aide chuckling. After Yukihime left her carriage, and made it a big deal sway her hips dramatically on her walk over to Naruto, she stood on her toes to beep him. Naruto, as he always did, turned his head. The beep landed on his cheek. To what do I owe the pleasure of your company, Yuki? Naruto grinned, not because he was glad to see her, but because he had called her by an abbreviated name. She might think it was a term of endearment. But, she had no idea why people called her that behind her back. I have come to say my farewell, kind sir. Yukihime put a tender look on her face, and then fluttered her hands ever so slightly. I have been put in command of a regiment of soldiers. I will also be directing groups of shinobi, including a number of Anbu squads. Anbu, you say? Naruto's gaze was intense for a moment. Yes, we will be leaving later this evening. Headed for territory held by the grass. By good fortune, the alliance with the sand remains as strong as ever, and we may soon have an agreement with the hidden village of rock. As I understand it, you had something to do with that turn of events. Yukihime leaned up against Naruto, and bumped him subtly with her hip. Naruto made no move to reciprocate. I played a role in it that, he admitted. But, if anything, Tsunade did more to make it happen than I did. He smiled. The best work may have been done by the frog hermit. I think that the rock came to terms because we promised to bring that old beep home. I see. Yukihime's face changed. As I hear it, the legendary Sanin is quite fond of watching naked women. She thrust her chest out some. You spent a number of years as his apprentice, did you not? The look she gave Naruto was not subtle. Perhaps we should continue our discussion, upstairs. Hinata froze. She didn't think that Naruto had any feelings for that woman. At least, no feelings of love or admiration. Lust was a different question. She didn't think that he was the type to throw himself on any woman who came his way. But, how could she be sure? If they headed inside, she would have to depart post-haste. I couldn't think of wasting such a beautiful evening indoors, Naruto said, taking a deep breath of air. The scents are so wonderful. He shook his mane of hair. Then took a blossom off of a vine, smelling it. You mentioned Anbu squads. They are needed in the battle. Their talents are needed in Konoha too. Enemy incursions against the Hidden Leaf village had been increasing notably over the past few weeks. It might be a subject he should touch on when he got to his meeting. As you will no doubt hear, the battle goes well, but much hinges on the coming campaign. If we can win through, the conflict may end. Yukonime said. The amount of lives and resources that could be saved makes the risk worthwhile. Besides, one of the units will be the one led by that detestable Hyuga girl. Konoha would be better off with her and that motley crew gone. She checked to see if anyone was listening. When she continued, it was in a hushed voice. In fact, I predict that her group will have a reckoning. I see, you are indeed a woman of great passions. Naruto fought hard to keep his anger from showing. Your grudge against the Anbu leader must be great. Yes, Yukihime replied, thinking that Naruto's calm acceptance of her hint meant that he supported her actions. She is wretched, and rather presumptuous. No wonder she is unattached. The pompous woman smiled, and then laughed a high-pitched laugh. If the rumors are true, she remains a virgin. Up in Naruto's home, Hinata reached for her sword by reflex. Closing her eyes, she lay there in growing misery. Naruto coughed, and then spoke. I see nothing wrong with that. I find women who throw themselves on men to further themselves to be much more contemptible, don't you? Well, that is, Yukihime tensed up, wondering if that had been directed at her. It couldn't have. He was still smiling, and she was a great prize amongst the women of Konoha. Now, for the matter of revenge. Naruto made a big show of rubbing his chin, looking as if he were deep in thought. I think that the best way to seek revenge on Hyuga Hinata would be to deny her squad a chance to join the battle. He didn't want to call Yukihime out, or denounce her in front of the military planners, unless he absolutely had no other choice. Her family had too many connections, and now was not the time for any political infighting. It would cause quite a stir, if you make your decision publicly, saying that you judge her abilities to be lacking. Yukihime laughed. You are quite the perfect match for me. She took out a small paper fan. Your thought is so delicious, just like yourself. Once more she beeped Naruto, winning his chin this time. So, you will do that? Naruto kept his voice even. No, I think not. Yukihime made a fancy gesture with her fan. It might exceed my authority. What's more, I would be glad to see that woman gone, should we all be so fortunate. Yukihime's eyes flashed, remembering past indignities. Though, I suppose I could petition to keep the entire squad here in reserve. Stationed in Konoha, I would have more time to spend with you. I will not be here, Naruto said. A little too quickly. And, I would think more highly of you, should you do battle personally. He put his hands behind his neck. Of course, your reputation will never match that of Hyuga Hinata. If she is on the same battlefield, her actions will eclipse yours like the moon does the sun. But, we all know that the sun is brighter and more beautiful, Yukihime hastened to say. Just the same, perhaps I will see if I can leave her Anbu squad behind. They could sit around ignominiously, spending their time in the local pubs. When Naruto noted that he must soon head over to a meeting, Yukihime left in grand fashion. Soon thereafter, Hinata headed back outside. I'm glad that she's gone, Naruto said when Hinata rejoined him. I will need to deal with her through Snade, but it won't be easy. I'm thoroughly sick of politics, and I haven't even made Hokage yet. She means to see me and my men killed, Hinata said, the disgust plain on her face. I truly wish that I could return the favor. She looked up at Naruto's face, eyes catching hints of lipstick. She wished that she could do like Yukonime had, even if Naruto paid no more attention to her beeps than he did to Yukihime's. Thank you for looking out for us. But, I don't intend to hide behind anyone. She is as beautiful as a butterfly, but as treacherous as a wasp. Naruto sighed. But, I am tired of thinking about that selfish woman. I expect that a pot will be here soon. She will. Hinata flinched, hating herself for doing so. You seem quite popular these days. She wondered how many of the women who sought his favor did so because they cared about him. Most probably did not. Judging by her actions, a pod might truly love him. But, she was only a guest in the village. Her assignment was temporary. Was that reason to hold out hope? Naruto called over to his aide, telling him to have a pot wait for him under the balcony. Preparing to go back inside, he told his plan to Hinata. I suppose it's a role reversal of sorts, he laughed. Tonight, a test, if you like. I'm going to have her improvise on her true feelings for me. Naruto smiled. Of course, she will scold me, eyeing that she should be the one on the balcony. Hinata imagined herself on a balcony, with Naruto down below. There really wasn't any reason to picture that, was there? Her hope was an anchor around her neck, an albatross. She's coming, sir. The aide went to meet Apot. Please don't tell Apot anything of my plot, Naruto said. If she knows, her words will be prepared, just like a speech. I want to hear things straight from her heart. There was a strange look in his eyes. Okay, Hinata said, feeling bad about her lie. When Naruto was gone, and Apot stood alone under the huge balcony, she moved to speak secretly to the waterfall shinobi. Apot, Hinata said quietly, one finger on her lips. Squad leader. The other girl wondered why Hinata was there. Hinata explained Naruto's plan. But, if I wasn't the one who wrote any of those letters, Apot looked worried. If I speak for myself, I'll ruin everything. Almost opening her mouth with an offer to help, Hinata stood by feeling unsympathetic. Life was hard. Everybody had to face that cold fact sometime or another. The sound of a sliding door could be heard. Then, a light patter of footsteps. Apot, are you there? It was Naruto. Yes, I am. Apot looked up. She could be seen from above, but a nearby Hinata could not. Why am I to wait down here? Apot already knew the answer to that. Humor me, Naruto said. I'm trying my hand at drama. And, I want to know how you feel about me, off the top of your heart. You know how I feel, Apot said, hoping to avoid this game. No, I really don't. Naruto placed one hand on the banister. I'm a guy. We can't always see things for ourselves. Sometimes we need to be shown, or told quite plainly. Hinata muttered under her breath. Wasn't that the truth? Quote, oh, well, Apot tried to find the right words. I adore you, she thought furiously, her hand twitching. I love you, she tensed up. I love you, a lot. She stumbled onward, sounding insipid in her own ears. I love you more than the stars, and twice as much as the moon. With each following word, she felt her tongue growing thicker. Naruto frowned, scratching his head. I should be happy that you feel that way about me. But, it's strange. Your words just don't move me. Not like they moved me before. He shrugged. It almost seems as if someone else wrote those wonderful letters. Maybe tonight, you're just not feeling like yourself. He rubbed his nose. I have meetings I should prepare for. We should try this again some other night. Turning, he made his way back inside. But, Apot stopped. Once she heard the closing of the door. She looked up at the house. A light went on in one of the rooms. She turned to Hinata, who quickly hid a grin. Please, squad leader, Hinata, can you help me? Apot rubbed one foot along the ground. I can't do this on my own. Well, what woman doesn't want to see young love blossom? Hinata knew the answer to her own question. What say we do things my way this time? She decided to help. She had started something by penning those love notes. In some ways, she felt honor-bound to follow through. She had been petty before. Apot nodded vigorously, and then smiled. Thank you. If it wasn't for you, I would never have a chance to win his heart fully. Here, Hinata scooped up a handful of gravel and poured it into Apati's hand. Watching as most of it fell through her fingers before she reacted. Throw that at his window. Throw it until he opens it and looks out. Okay. Apot knew there must be more. Then I should stay in the open. And you will feed me words from out of sight. Exactly, Hinata replied. Whatever I whisper, you repeat. The girl from the waterfall did as she was instructed. Naruto opened his window, looking somewhat cross at first. When he caught sight of Apot, his face softened. Reciting the words that Hinata gave her, Apot spoke, describing her feelings to Naruto, never realizing that it was truly Hinata's feelings that she spoke. But, her speech was halting, as she waited for Hinata's cues and tried to fit the fanciful words to her lips. Why are your words so hesitant? Naruto asked. Are you speaking from your heart, or are you trying to make up something you think I might want to hear? PSSSSSSSS Street. Apot, step under here now. Hinata took a deep breath, hoping she could pull things off. I will copy your voice and do the talking. After the other girl did so, She spoke in a voice rich with emotion. Her Anbu training was coming in handy. A tear forming in each eye. Hinata told Naruto all of the things she had wished to tell him over the years, careful not to say anything that would be out of character for a pot. By Naruto's responses, it seemed that he was touched by the heartfelt words. I want a beep. A pot blurted out loudly, during a pause. That would be so romantic. It's what this kind of moment calls for. It will prove we are meant to stay together, forever. Her beeps in the past had merely set the stage for this one. But, Hinata clenched her fists. It should be her beep. There seemed to be no justice in life. Go ahead, walk where he can see you, ask for what you want. Apot did just that. Naruto told Apot to climb the trellis outside of his window. He wouldn't mind being fashionably late to his meetings. Miss Hinata, that horrid woman is returning. Naruto's aide pointed. Yukihime's carriage was heading back down the street. What does she want? Hinata scowled. While she was none too happy about the beeping that must be taking place. She was not about to let Yukihime ruins things for anyone. He told her that he had some place to go. I can ask her to leave, the aide said, looking somewhat pale. If he did that, the woman might see fit to have some ill befall him, despite Naruto's protection. No, Hinata said. Go inside. Find Ichigawa. Bring me his robes, and that silly wide-brimmed hat he sometimes wears. Hurry, she nodded, an idea taking firm root as the man scampered off. All the world's a stage. Once she had the items she requested, Hinata quickly put them on, and then climbed a tree near Naruto's balcony. Just as the clattering of horses' hooves grew their loudest, Yukihime stepped out of her carriage, and worked to fix her hair. Looking up at the lit window, she smoothed her clothing. She would do whatever it took to spend some romantic time alone with Uzumaki Naruto. Someone had told her that the meetings he spoke of had been pushed back to later. Just as the other woman passed under her bow, Hinata jumped down, hitting the ground and moaning in a man's voice. Ah me, I have just fallen from space. How could this have happened? Staggering, she grabbed hold of Yukihime. Get off of me, you dirty crazy fool. Yukihime kicked hard, moving Hinata a few feet away, her face hidden behind the sharply tipped hat. Dirty. Hinata made herself sound incredulous. I cannot be dirty. There is no dirt in space. Hinata added a touch of insanity to her tone of voice, making Yukihime take a step backwards, reflexively. Lo, but there is dirt on the moon, my home. Leave here, you maniac. Yukihime put her hands up, ready to perform hand seals if necessary. I will give you but one chance to move away, before I call for the guards. When the wind blew a lock of hair in front of her face, she pushed it away. Changing her stance, she added, perhaps I should deal more harshly with you myself. She reached under her pearl-studded coat to bring out a kunai. Oh-h-h-h-h-h-h, Hinata spoke in an excited voice, waving her arms and dancing about in apparent glee. You have one of my anchors. I am saved. If I hadn't lost that, I never would have drifted off into space. If you it to me, I won't float away again. I told you to go away and never approach me again. Yukihime's voice grew strident. And I will surely give you this, but not in a manner you might wish. Wish. Hinata stood with her legs akimbo. Wish. She jerked about a bit. You've come upon the answer. There is intelligent life on this planet after all. She rubbed her hands together. If we both wish for me to be gone, I might yet reach the moon again. For it was my wish on her beautiful face that brought me to our embrace the first time. The white-eyed ninja was smiling under her hat, enjoying herself even more than she had with Suzuka. The look on Yukihime's face was priceless. And this tale would make great telling amongst the troops. Not only that, she would make certain to repeat it to Yukihime someday. You will have no need for wishes if you are dead. Yukihime readied her weapon, but then decided to remove her fancy coat first. If you don't wish that, I will tell you one more time, be on your way, immediately. Ah-h-h-h-h-h-h, poor me. Hinata sounded at wit's end. Poor helpless me. Poor unjustly threatened me. The blood of the gentry has thinned so very much. Yet another reason I sought a life elsewhere. She stuck out her finger and pointed at the other woman. If you kill me, you will bear my heias. You will be cursed, you and your family, until my body rests under the soil of my beloved moon. Hinata had to keep from laughing. Stupid. Unwashed. Son of a whore. Yukihime's voice could have frozen steel. I will owe you nothing. I will need to bathe myself again tonight, just having laid eyes on you. Continuing to spout bizarre and insane things in response to Yukihime's heated replies, Hinata ran this way and that, pretending to fall, stumble, or jerk aside by good fortune, just being missed by the other shinobi's strikes. When Yukihime stopped, and began working hand seals, Hinata threw off her hat and robe. You would use that jutsu against a poor unfortunate civilian. Hinata stood with her hips, mimicking a pose she had seen Lee and Guy use many times. If I had truly been a lost and sickly man, the kind of person we are sworn to protect, you would have struck me down. Her voice was rich with contempt. She knew just what to say to hit the sorest spot of all. It seems that the blood of your family does run thin. But then again, there's a good reason that it's not mentioned in the same breath as Hyuga's, or the remade Uchiha clan. She knew that those words would strike Yukihime deeper than any kunai could. Hyuga Hinata. Yukihime began to seethe with rage. She noticed the light go out in Naruto's room. I wonder if Naruto caught your impressive display, Hinata said, twisting the verbal knife again. No doubt something like that will win his heart. She spun the hat around on her fingers. Isn't that why he wants to be Hokage, to step on the little people? It's none of your concern. Yukihime took a few steps towards Hinata. What could it possibly matter? The opinion of someone like you, a woman too worthless to ever bed a man. Is there a problem here? Naruto walked up with a pot, clasping her fingers in his. Naturally not, Yukihime said, waving her arm and trying to sound unconcerned. Her eyes narrowed when she saw that the two newcomers were holding hands. A pot? Congratulations, her smile could have curdled milk. I suppose it is always beneficial for the leaf to encourage cultural exchanges. Hinata began a barely audible poem about beeping. That had the arrogant shinobi clenching her teeth. I'm afraid those beeps will have to last you for a while. Yukihime sounded triumphant, as she walked over and put her coat back on. You should beep Naruto one last time, my dear. That statement came out with a chilling effect. What do you mean? Apot asked, bringing a hand to her mouth. Your squad. She turned from Apot to Hinata, grinning a wicked grin. I should say your squad. She ignored the look that Naruto was giving her. You will be heading out immediately, as soon as I can muster the troops. She held up her nails and gave them a quick once-over. I know you will all do the leaf proud. She smiled. And the waterfall too, of course. I hope you are not acting out of pride, Naruto said. The only worse thing would be to act out of spite. He let those words hang in the air. If I ever found that one of Konoha's ninjas ever cost the life of a comrade that way, I wouldn't rest until justice was done. His look had everyone flinching. Then, like a rainbow after a thunderstorm, his usual smile appeared. Luckily, I don't know anyone like that. Of course not. Yukihime took out a kerchief and dabbed at her forehead. Hyuga Hinata, gather your men. I too will head out to battle, after I am finished with my meetings. Naruto whispered something in Apati's ear, and then gave her a quick beep on the cheek. After striding off down the road, he stopped, turned, and shouted. Hinata, watch after Apot. After that, he flashed from view. I'll do what I can, Hinata shouted in reply. But, I can't promise anything. And make certain that she still writes. Naruto called back. I can promise that much, Hinata said to herself with a sigh. Exit stage right. The sun shone down unmercifully. Soldiers were scorched by the heat of it. Those men who were not shinobi, and were likely to meet their opposites in battle, had taken to wearing armor. Ninjas from Hidden Leaf Village, along with shinobi from the allied nations, perched high in the trees waiting, while the pikemen, archers, and sword-bearers waited in trenches, and behind hastily thrown-up stonework. Their light clothing served them better in the seasonal warmth. But, they were no better at surviving the lack of water. Even the most powerful ninjas could not divine water, or pull the aqueous substance from the dry and cracked earth with their jutsus. Everyone hoped that one of the supply wagons would arrive before they had to go into battle. I don't like this. Not at all. I don't think I will ever get used to it. Hinata wiped sweat from her brow. standing on a thick bough, high in the crown of a towering oak. She was not referring to the drought. Those came and went across the years. Instead, she referred to the newer way of fighting. I know what you mean, Tenten said, passing hand signals along the chain of command. I can see why the changes took place initially. The number of shinobi had grown incredibly low in some villages. But this gnaws at my conscience. It almost seems as if honor has just disappeared. She broke open a green stick, and beeped at the pulp, unable to make much saliva in her mouth. She and her fellow leaf warriors, soldiers and shinobi alike, were trapped in a siege. We never had to put up with anything like this before, Ino added. Not unless it was against a whole village. Now that full-scale battles depended so much on foot soldiers and horsemen, the unthinkable could happen. In the past, when fighting was done with ninjas, there was no way that shinobi would have been caught up in a siege. We can't abandon our comrades, Hinata said with a sigh. Any of us could slip past the enemy soldiers, worrying only about the shinobi lining up against us. B.U.T. Tenten adjusted one of her hair buns. The soldiers couldn't do the same. It makes me sick at heart, Ino said. Not just people who are dying. Look at this forest. She waved her arms in numerous directions. The three women could easily see the latrines, springing up out of the ground like grotesque toadstools. Trees had been blasted down or cut, used to build fortifications. The earth had been pushed up into great mounds by jutsu, and fire pits dotted the land like blemishes on a lovely woman's skin. I hear that Naruto has plans to bring things back to the way they were, when he is Hokage. If anyone can do it, it's him. I'm sure he'll find a way. Tenten watched as the troops below used colored flags to signal one another. I'm sorry, Hinata. I shouldn't have mentioned his name. It's all right, Hinata said. He's in my thoughts all of the time, anyway. She made a face. I almost wish he was camped with the soldiers down below. That way I wouldn't have to cross enemy lines every morning. Handing Apathy's letters to one of the couriers. Ino looked at Tenten, and then frowned. A newcomer had also arrived, and had caught the end of that conversation. She was the first one to voice her opinion. That's ridiculous, Hinata. It was Sakura, freshly back from treating the growing number of wounded. She and her fellow medical ninjas rarely got any sleep. He-Face bore silent testimony to that fact. You have an important role here, and that takes up enough of your time and strength. She walked over and placed her forehead against Hinata's, taking her temperature. You don't need to wear down your body. Just because you are skilled enough to do what that girl can't. She's right, Ino said. This style of fighting is trying enough. You don't need to break our heart again each morning before battle, writing those damn letters. You are taking your love of poetry too far. Tenten sounded angry. There will be no more plays or recitals, if you get yourself killed. She poked Hinata in the chest with her finger. We won't be there in the audience to watch, if you get us killed too. Her last comment was only partly in jest. Thank you for caring, Hinata said. I'm very fortunate to have such good friends. She shook her head sadly. I promised Naruto I would do this. I also gave my word to Apot. Do you understand now? I honor my word, no matter what. In a quieter voice she added. Just like he does. Wise up. Sakura was growing irate. I don't think that big idiot would expect you to kill yourself over this. She clenched her fists. Opening her mouth to give Hinata a piece of her mind, she grimaced and rubbed her eyes. A soldier down below had raised a particular flag. There was another group of wounded coming back from the front. Well, I've got to go. It's been fun. With that, she flashed from view. She's right, Ino said, as much as I hate to agree with a girl with such a big forehead. Tenten nodded her head. I agree, she said. About Naruto, not about the forehead. My head hears you, Hinata said. But not my heart. She broke off a branch, and then began pulling leaves off one at a time, watching them spin and rock on their way down. I worry about him. But he worries about her. I doubt he even spares a thought for me. Men. Tenten grumped, driving a kunai deep into the wood beneath her feet. Tell me about it, Ino said. You miss Neji, don't you? Ino already knew the answer. She just wanted to change the subject, for their leader's sake. Yes, Tenten said. His squad is fighting against the rain. That is mainly a shinobi battle for now. From the intelligence reports I've seen, the enemy has no one capable of standing against him one-on-one, or group against his group. She looked out over the battlefield. It seemed to stretch on to eternity. I sometimes doubt I will ever make it back myself. Her voice had grown weary, even pessimistic. Nonsense, Hinata said, more life in her voice. The leaf has triumphed when it counted most, time and time again. We have a strong ally in the sand, seeing that Gaara remains Kazekage. It doesn't hurt that Temari is married to Shikamaru, Tenten said. Finding Hinata's attitude contagious. Oh, I did it again. Sorry Ino. It's all right, Ino said. I stopped pining over him years ago. You know that. When they all headed off in different directions to see to their duties, Hinata went to look for a pot. She found the exhausted girl fast asleep in the crook of a graceful elm. Sitting on a branch not too far above the waterfall ninja, she began to compose the next letter. She no shortage of things to say. The food may have run out, but her feelings for Naruto never would. Only a few minutes had passed before a number of soldiers began shouting her name. There was talk of mutiny amongst the men. They hoped that Hinata could help somehow. Arriving on the scene, she started off by chiding the men, calling them out on points of honor. After that, she began a soliloquy, a comical turn she had written for an unfinished play. Walking along a tall embankment, she called out her words, causing the men to laugh more and more. Soon, that laughter sounded like a battle cry, coming even from men too weak to stand. Knowing that a number of musicians had been conscripted into the city militia, she asked if any had brought their instruments. By miracle, some had, even at the cost of fewer clean clothes and provisions. Gathering together, the artists put on an impromptu show. Before they knew it, the men of the army had forgotten about their hunger. Hours later, a loud whistle sounded. Tenten pointed in the direction of a cut between berms. A carriage was coming. It was Yukihime's. Their commander had returned from eating of high-ranking military planners. An uneasy grumbling began amongst the men, punctuated by a fair number of disgruntled comments. Some statements bordered on treason, and were quickly shouted down. Many of the soldiers couldn't help but wonder if their leader had been sleeping in feather beds, after eating fancy meals and drinking her fill of water. Stop your moping around. Hinata's voice rang out. You're men, not cattle who can't find any grass. She showed her own good humor, chuckling when a number of men made cow calls. Yukihime walked up, wearing clean clothing and looking rather refreshed. She sniffed and held her nose high, walking by fragrant men who hadn't washed in days. Commander, it's wonderful that you can join us again. Hinata bowed to the higher-ranking shinobi. Our spirits drop when you are gone too long from us. Hinata's claim had the men putting their hands over their mouths. I think it would do the men's morale a great service, if you can tell us your exploits on last week's battlefront. Yukihime looked as if she realized Hinata's duplicity. She opened her mouth, about to question the smaller woman's motives. One of the men began to applaud, after nudging a couple of his buddies. Soon, there were scores of whistles and hoots. Applause started at one end of the line, then moved on down like falling dominoes. Well, how can I refuse that? Yukihime preened, choosing to believe the soldiers were being honest in their acclaim. When she struck a heroic pose, she either didn't hear the snickers that arose, or managed to ignore them. Face flushed, she told of her role in the fires fighting. At one point, she brought up something that Hinata hoped she would. The dead piled up around us. We reaped the grass as it had never been reaped before. Then, to confuse the enemy, I threw away my scarf. She meant the colored scarf that marked her as a ranking ninja in the army. That must have been it. A clever stratagem. Hinata climbed to stand next to Yukihime on the watchtower she had ascended. To think that the men all questioned your courage, believing that a brave and honorable shinobi of the leaf would never toss aside the very thing that drew the enemy's attention. Yukihime put her hand on her sword, fighting an urge to strike Hinata down. She struggled to maintain her dignity, seeing that everyone was watching her. If you like, I will wear it in your place when the battle starts, Hinata said, knowing that she was behaving in an irresponsible fashion. At that moment, she was too tired and too emotionally drained to care. I will direct the Anbu and ground troops too, if you wish more of them to survive. She felt the hatred bubbling up inside of her. Yukihime had put the Anbu squad in the van of the attack on more than one occasion. That is an easy claim for any braggart to make, Hyuga Hinata. Yukihime bristled at the insolence of her subordinate. It is a cheap way to appear brave. She turned to face the assembled men. The scarf lay where no warrior on our side could possibly reach it. Your captain here can easily make such a pledge, as the scarf no doubt decorates some enemy tent or flagpole. I think not, Hinata said. Resounding cheers rang out when she held up the very scarf in question. Keep it, Yukihime said. Enjoy your small victory. She signaled to a sentry, Spi, acting with the man when he gave his report. Finished, she addressed the assembled ranks. We attack the enemy in under an hour's. Listen for the signal to advance. Fight with every ounce of bravery you possess. Since this will be the pivotal battle, if we can buy enough time for the reinforcement to arrive, we will all earn the gratitude of our villages. There was no cheering. There were no shouts of eagerness, or great slogans. The men went about their preparations as need be, some buoyed by the knowledge that things might well be over soon, one way or another. Hinata bowed and thanked Yukihime for a chance to die with glory. The other woman couldn't tell whether she was being serious or sarcastic. Hinata tossed the scarf at her company commander's feet. Apot walked over yawning. Hinata laughed, hearing that the girl had slept through everything that had taken place after the commander had arrived. I would give anything to have Naruto here today, Apot said. I won't die before I get a chance to see him again. There was an odd look in her eyes. There's something I have to do. She placed her hands on her chest and closed her eyes. Here, Hinata said, handing a folded piece of parchment to Apot. If you see him again, you can pass this along in person. You had time to write for me again. Apot looked at Hinata with a raised eyebrow. Even with all of the preparations you were involved with. She looked down at the letter, and then unfolded it. There's a good chance that I will die today, Hinata said. Our fearless leader has it in for the entire company, but has a special love for me and my Anbu squad. She clenched her fists, filled with emotion. It's probably the last thing I will be able to write for you. Under her breath, she whispered, there were some things I couldn't left unsaid. What's this? Apot looked up from her reading. There's a few smeared areas. It looks like watermarks and runny ink. She stared at Hinata, close to guessing the truth. It was the work of tears. I apologize, Hinata said quickly. It's my sweat. I should have wiped my brow before bending over to finish my work. She took out a pen. All it lacks is your signature. Hinata. 1010 flashed into view. We have another carriage coming in. She strained her eyes to make out more details. I wish they'd send a provision wagon instead. I hope WHOEV. It is spared some room for medical supplies. A blood-covered Sakura walked up, looking even more weary than she had earlier. There aren't any flags on that carriage, Ino remarked. I wonder who might be in this one. Some puffed-up bigwig, here to spur us on, before jumping back inside and running for safety. I've seen that coach before, Yukihime said, glaring at Ino after hearing her commentary. It's reserved for special passengers. It could be one of the ministers, a group of elders, or even the Hokage herself. When the horses pulled up, and the door opened, Hinata felt her heart thumping hard against her chest. The first one to step out of the carriage was Naruto. Looking around the encampment, he made an, okay, signal. Moments later, Tsunade stepped down. A cheer went up from everyone who caught sight of her. What is that idiot doing here? Hinata stiffened. He's supposed to be on another front. He's not supposed to die here like a dog. And why did he bring the Hokage? That imbecile. That complete and utter moron. It sounds like she's happy to see him, Ino remarked to 1010. You think? Ino smiled. Sakura ran over and hugged Suand. She gave her teacher a detailed rundown on the wounded and status of medical supplies. She gave Naruto an even bigger hug when he motioned to the carriage. They had brought medicines and treatment scrolls. Hinata was beside herself in anger. That had Ino and 1010 trying to calm her down. Don't you want to see him one more time before you die? 1010 asked, being brutally honest. This will give you one more reason to do your best. No. Hinata watched as Naruto walked along one of the battlements, giving one of his impassioned speeches. For a moment, she pictured him as he was, back when he wore the orange and black jumpsuit. raising the spirit of anyone he fought beside. He won't just stop by for morale's sake, and move on. He'll be at the front of things. He won't leave until the battle's decided, or they carry him off the field. But, we're stronger for his being here, Ino said quietly. The enemy will have to divert a lot of resources to deal with one such as him. I don't care. Hinata began to tremble ever so slightly. If we lost him, the cost would be too high. No victory could be worth that. If the Leaf lost its Hokage, that would be tragic enough. But, if they lost their future leader, that would be catastrophic. He won't listen to reason, Sakura said, walking by to see if anyone wanted a light stimulant before battle. She had bundles of fresh herbs that had come in on the carriage. I scolded him for bringing Tsunade out here. She is too tempting a prize for enemy assassins. But, this is his place. She met Hinata's gaze. If this is the most important battle of the war, we need our strongest shinobi. He told me that Jiraiya is bringing the remainder of the Junin from the other front. They won't make it in time for the initial assaults, Hinata said. They are reinforcements at best. Replacements. She mumbled. No one can replace him. She's right, you know, Ino said, after hearing Sakuta echo her own thoughts. If things are as bleak as you think they are, will you tell him your secret? Quote, if you're going to die anyway, what harm could it do? Ten spoke very softly. She couldn't help but think of Neji again. Hinata stood speechless, like a genin fresh out of the academy faced by an enemy cage. Here he comes, Ino said. Sure enough, Naruto was making his way in their direction. He brushed past an eager and fawning Yukihime without paying her any notice. Naruto. Apot ran up. My love, what are you doing here? She threw herself into his arms. I had to see you again, Naruto answered. It was so important, that I couldn't wait any longer. There was an unmistakable ring of truth to his words. You were out of my sight much too long for my liking. Hinata was too caught up in her emotions to catch the subtle catch in Naruto's voice. Having studied him for years, she was the only one who might have noticed. Instead, thinking that Naruto had been so filled with love for Apot that he rushed to the battlefield, she hung her head. Looking up, she summoned up her resolve, and then marched over to him. It's sheer lunacy for you to be here. Hinata's voice was harsh. You should take the Hokage back to safety this very instant. Lunacy. Naruto smiled. The way his mouth and eyes looked reminded Hinata of earlier days again. In a quieter voice, he spoke in her ear. You mean like a man falling from the moon? He nodded his head, seeing Hinata bring a hand to her mouth. He hadn't been oblivious to her ploy to delay Yukihime that previous evening. You can't leave, now that you're here. Apot grabbed firm hold of Naruto's arm. Stay with me, as long as you can. No matter what happens. Ino and Ten grabbed Hinata's arm, holding her back. It looked like she was ready to strike the other girl. That fooly, shishitwit of a shinobi was going to get him killed. Really, you want me to stay? Even though my life might be at risk? Naruto laughed. Well, you must truly love me. Yes. Apot placed her face against his chest. Her words were somewhat muffled. Please don't leave. With you here, I know we can't fail. I know that I can't fail. She wiggled her way under his arm. Well, I will be certain to Eve. That voice had everyone turning and staring. It was Ichigawa. But, not before we deliver all of the things I baked. He gave Naruto a guy-like pose, complete with light reflecting from his teeth. This had been his employer's idea. Together, with other food smiths, the baker had worked hard to put together a string of wagons filled with fresh food. We'll be leaving with him, another man said. But, we still have some time to do our share. It was the head of the musicians' guild. He had come with Ichigawa, accompanied by a large number of men with instruments. You did this. Hinata looked at Naruto. She was so moved, that she almost blurted out her feelings for him then and there. Ten. Ino. Roused all the men. Let's see if we can get a good meal in before we fight. Cheers rang out again, even louder than they had been for the Hokage's arrival. They all began chanting Ichigawa's name, calling him the hero of the day. As Hinata watched, her heart swelled with pride for the baker. A soldier had limped over to the supply wagon, trying to hide his face. He had trouble walking, looking as if he were weak from a number of treated wounds. It was the very man who had run off with Sada. Here, don't hide your face. There's food for everyone. Ichigawa placed a plate of food into the soldier's trembling hands. We're all members of the Leaf. And those that are not, they are our brothers and allies. The enemy is out there. He pointed in the wrong direction, but it was the gesture itself that mattered. The soldier fell to his knees and sobbed his thanks. The men may be right, Hinata said, speaking to Ichigawa after she walked over to grab a quick bite. You may be the best man on the field today. I'm just a baker, Miss Hinata. Ichigawa blushed, hearing that praise. I do what I love. He glanced over at Naruto, who was busy running food off to men who couldn't leave their posts. Look at him. He's going to be Hokage someday. But he's lugging supplies like the greenest soldier. He smiled. How can I do any less? Yes. Hinata followed Naruto with her eyes. How could they afford to lose him today? He was the future of the Leaf. With a heart like his, he could bring accords between nations that no one else could. You're pretty special yourself, Miss Hinata. Ichigawa gave her a special pastry that he had been hiding. I wish I could hide you in one of the empty barrels and sneak you out of here. What? Hinata's eyebrows both shot upward. She looked over at the large barrels that had been holding water and watered down wine. You may just have given me the idea I need. She spoke without realizing who stood behind her. Don't even think about it, Hinata. It was Naruto. I grew up a prankster. You're pretty good, but I'm a natural. Hinata was at a loss for words. You see, I was just looking past Naruto. She saw Ino pantomiming a lovesick confession. Gritting her teeth, she watched as Ten drew a large heart in the dirt. Word has it that you've done a magnificent job out here, Hinata. Naruto swept his arm, encompassing the entire countryside with his gesture. Despite the terrible situation you have been placed in, he looked over at Yukihime, who had put her scarf back on. I have to go now. Make certain you come back alive. You are more valuable to Konoha than you want to admit to yourself. With that, he handed a stack of empty plates to Ichigawa and hurried off. Hinata stood wordless, tears coming to her eyes. Seeing that, neither Ten nor Ino had the heart to chide her about missed opportunities. Well, if Naruto is staying for battle, then so am I. Yukihime's statement drew a long series of cheers. To her, it meant that she would be seen as heroic. To the men, it meant that she had a better chance of being killed. The fact that she decided to carry plates about the way that Naruto had did not win her any friends. Later, seeing that there was little time left before the fighting would begin, Apot wandered over some to get something to eat. Seeing Hinata, she walked up and tugged on her sleeve. Hinata, just how many letters did you write? She had been caught off guard by a comment that Naruto had made. Well, Hinata felt like a kid caught with her hand in the candy jar. You see, she coughed, and then began again, sounding more like her usual self. I wrote at least one per day. Some days, I wrote 2 or 3. You're kidding. Apathy's eyes went very wide for a moment, and then narrowed to mere slits. She was about to say something more, but Naruto stepped over again, looking for her. So, Naruto, my heart, did you come to this battle because you love me? Apot nibbled daintily on a small turkey leg. All I can say is I must have been driven mad by those beautiful letters you wrote me. Naruto's smile never faded, even though he caught the quick look of anguish on Hinata's face. At first, I was captivated with your beauty alone, he bowed. But then, when you started writing, I came to love the inner you, your soul. Do you mean you would love me, even if I was ugly? Apathy's bell-like laugh rang out. Men will say anything to win a woman's virtue. Yes, Naruto said, I could give my heart to the woman who wrote those letters. He smiled and gave Apot a beep on the cheek. That will have to be my farewell. I wanted to be certain that you heard those words before I left. I need to go raise the spirits of the younger shinobi. Apot turned back to Hinata after Naruto had left. Naruto doesn't really love me, she said. She made no sign of being crestfallen. He loves what he thinks is my soul, which means that he actually loves you. Watching Hinata's face, she nodded her head. And you have loved him in secret. I have, Hinata admitted. When Apot left to retrieve her weapons bag, Hinata walked one battlement alone. Looking down below, she saw Naruto rallying a group of chunin. Head abuzz, she felt compelled to ask him a question. Naruto-kun. She went to join him when he took a moment to check the attachment of his great summoning scroll. Gggggggh, he made a face, closing a latch on his finger. He put the bleeding finger in his mouth. Is there something I can do for you, Hinata? I was curious. For Apathy's sake, Hinata rubbed her fingers together. She hated to lie that way. If she was short, not tall. If she was dark, not fair. If she wasn't so light of spirit, she swallowed hard. Would you feel the same way about her? Naruto studied Hinata for a moment. Yes, he said, my feelings for her wouldn't change in the slightest. I see. Hinata tensed up, feeling some need to hide. It was like she was a genin, hiding behind a training post again. Or, a lamp post. On the day Naruto had gone off to train with Jiraiya, her heart swelling with joy, she fought her sudden shyness, deciding to tell Naruto her secret. There's something I want to. Captain. A messenger ran up, breaking the moment. Captain, the sentries say that they saw a pot charging towards the enemy lines by herself. He looked at Naruto. She was calling out your name. She wanted us to tell that she was going out to prove her love. Hinata felt a stab of guilt. Her admission to a pot, coupled with Naruto's words about the letters, had sent the girl rushing towards her death. The tea would be a terrible blot on her conscience. Worse, Apot was weak-willed and fragile. If she was captured and put to torture, the enemy could extract any battle plans from her before she died. I will bring her back. Hinata moved to leave. No. Naruto shook his head. That is for me. This is something that I must do. He was gone before Hinata could protest. As Naruto ran off, Hinata realized that she could never tell Naruto her true feelings, not after this. Suddenly, cries of alarm rang out. Looking up, Hinata saw an unbelievable number of arrows in the air. The enemy must have shinobi archers. Not only could such men sneak close undetected, but their powerful jutsus could multiply one arrow into dozens. Calling out orders, she correctly guessed that the arrow storm was not a reaction to Apot or Naruto, but instead signaled an enemy attack. There was no time for personal sadness or recriminations. It was time to fight. After that, everything seemed a blur for a very long time. When the melee was finally over, Hinata staggered over to where she saw Ino and Tenten. Both girls were wounded, being treated by Sakura and Shizune. Hinata herself was unscathed, except for a shallow gash on one calf. Hinata. Tenten looked particularly solemn. I'm sorry. She pointed over to a covered stretcher. Hinata's heart went into her throat, and then threatened to stop beating altogether. That couldn't be Naruto. She fell to her knees in prayer, before pulling the canvas off of the corpse's face. It was Apot. The girl's chest looked like it had been crushed by some great blow. Seeing her laying like that, dead, Hinata hung her head. Tears came to her eyes. This was all her fault. Folding Apathy's arms gently across her chest, she felt the rustle of paper. Searching, he found the last letter she had written. Apot had never had a chance to give it to Naruto. She would do that, and she would keep the secret. A messenger arrived in a great hurry. Not seeing Hinata where she kneeled, the man handed a scroll to Tenten. She gasped, and then shouted for Hinata. Ino ran off to points unknown. What is it? Hinata asked. It's Naruto. Tenten looked pale. He must have come upon Apathy's body. Scouts say that he charged the enemy's group of top shinobi on his own. What? Hinata brought a hand to her mouth. Naruto had gone up against the best that the grass had in the field today. By himself. If he died, that would be her fault too. Well, if he went down, he would not go down alone. No, don't. Tenten's words went unheeded. Wait. Hinata moved as quickly as she could, flashing from one point to another, astounding the common soldiers who saw a mere blur pass them by. Stopping only to find out where Apathy's body had been found, and in which direction Naruto had gone. She moved on again, despite concerted efforts to stop her. At one point, she slowed to a walk, looking around her with a sense of disbelief. It would not be difficult to locate the site of Naruto's personal fight. Huge numbers of trees lay fallen, or split many times up the middle. The earth was charred terribly in many spots. The topsoil was missing over rocks that had been buried deep beneath the grassy surface. The ground under her foot squished. She began to sink. One large tract of land had been converted into an enormous swamp. That could only be the result of one of the jutsus Naruto had learned from the frog hermit. Hinata brought a hand to her mouth. Countless body parts decorated grass, weeds, and other types of ground cover. She had known that he had grown strong. But there had been no way to judge just how powerful he was. Now there was. She heard a sound. It was a faint one, but she knew it for a moan. She ran to the area. Skidding to a halt, she saw what she feared she might see. Laying in the center of a deep depression was Naruto. There were no survivors anywhere near him. Looking across the distance, straining in the decreasing light, she could see enemy forms gathering. No doubt they were preparing for another strike. Walking down the slope of the crater, she let out an involuntary gasp. Naruto's clothing was red, from head to toe. It had stated out beige. Blood. Every single inch of his body was covered with blood. You idiot. Hinata came close to sobbing, cursing Naruto. Hinata. Naruto's voice was faint. Hinata. Is that you? He coughed. Sounding terrible. I can't move at the moment. Things are getting dark. Hinata threw herself down on the ground, and then cradled Naruto's head in her arms. Naruto-kun. Naruto-kun, I am so sorry. Tears streamed down her face. This is all my fault. Nonsense, Naruto said, trying to sit up and failing. You didn't start this war. He groaned. His muscles felt as if someone had set them ablaze. That's not what I mean, Hinata said, putting her fingers over his mouth. Don't speak anymore. There should be medical ninjas on their way anytime now. She hissed her next words. Enemy soldiers are approaching too, but I won't let them have you. Looking over at the distant line of soldiers, Hinata swore that they would all be dead men if they came anywhere near Naruto. I don't need medics, Hinata. Naruto breathed in deep, and then gasped. His ribs hurt. There is nothing they can do for me. He coughed. I'm exhausted. That's all, he coughed. I just want to rest. I need to rest. His voice ran down. My chakra is gone. No, Hinata sobbed. Don't close your eyes, Naruto-kun. Please don't leave me. Her tears fell on his face. Geez, does it look like I can get up and go anywhere, Hinata? Naruto frowned. It feels like it's raining. OWWWWWW. It hurts to talk. His face was terribly swollen. Damn Fox needs to do his job better. Naruto-kun. Hinata wiped away her tears, touched by how Naruto could still joke, even at a moment such as this. Why did you do this? No, never mind. Her heart felt as if it was fracturing. How many men did you face? You great buffoon. She ran her hands through his clotted hair, caressing his scalp. Well, it was more than a mere 30, Naruto answered. And it was less than 100. He coughed again, grimacing with pain. Just barely. He tried to spit, but the saliva landed on his chin. Hinata wiped it away. There's no excuse. I shouldn't have ended up like this. Not against them. Shhhhhhhh. Hinata began crying again. You did wonderfully, Naruto-kun. I doubt that anyone could have done better. I'm very proud of you. She leaned down and gave him a soft beep on the forehead. Of course not, he tried to chuckle. And thank you. He looked up at the sky, watching the explosions from signal rockets fired by both sides. Would you like to read the farewell letter that Apot wrote to you? Hinata looked around, feeling somewhat easier. A large number of Leaf Shinobi were heading towards the enemy, 10-10 at their head. Medical ninjas stopped by, but Naruto asked them to leave. No one short of Sakura or Tsunade could make a difference for him. They were needed for the other men. Hinata waved away the ninjas and soldiers who wanted to see Naruto. Letter. Naruto tried again to get up, unsuccessfully. Yes, Hinata said, taking out the letter. Stay still, Naruto-kun. Unless you want me to use the Juken on you. She sighed. I found this next to Apati's heart. Hand it to me. Naruto reached out his hand. With his other hand, he tried to wipe the caked blood away from his eyes. His efforts to read were also confounded by the fact that darkness was falling quickly. Here, Naruto-kun. Let me, Hinata began speaking, her voice cracking now and again. She had put her very soul into the writing, and did so again with the retelling. Naruto closed his eyes, but told Hinata to continue, saying he was not dead. Hinata continued reciting the words until she was through with the letter. Her last words were, "I love you," but she never spoke Apathy's name. Even though the other girl had signed the note. Once again, Naruto sent a group of medical ninjas away, even though Hinata ordered them to approach. Naruto's orders superseded hers, and they still had many men to treat. Hinata swore to talk to Sakura about that, not to mention Tsunade and Shizune. At the end there, when your voice changed some, Naruto opened his eyes again. It reminded me of a voice I heard under my balcony that day. That had Hinata biting her lip. I'm amazed at the eyes a Hyuga has. The Byakugan. Why? Hinata took Naruto's hand in her own. Not that, Naruto said, moving his head from side to side. I never noticed before. He managed a smile. Can all of the Hyugas read in the dark? What? Hinata froze. She had recited the letter by memory, not by reading. It had gotten too dark to see the words. You wrote that letter, didn't you, Hinata? Naruto squeezed her hand. I would bet that you wrote each and every one of them. Why? Hinata pulled her hand free. How? She looked down at Naruto's face, trying to make out details in the low light. A pot. She didn't want to cheapen the love that the other girl had felt for him. I didn't love her, Hinata. Naruto said. She didn't love me. He coughed again. But, each of us had reasons to want others to believe that we loved one another. But, Hinata sat stunned. Just what was Naruto saying? You are not the only one who plays at being an actor now and then. Naruto tried to grin. Sometimes, my assignments require me to do so professionally. I'm pretty good, I think. Maybe better than you. Quote, I don't understand. Hinata couldn't believe what she was hearing. You are well aware that spies are constantly being sent into Konoha, Naruto said. They are usually easy enough to sniff out, thanks to the network of contacts that Ero Sennin has. He smiled. He still called his former sensei that from time to time. The old beep caught wind of a rather special spy. One we would normally have no reason to suspect. A pot. Hinata was too shocked to be angry at the dead girl. The whole sequence of events was getting to be too much for her to wrap her tired mind around. Yes, Naruto said. A pot. Either she was truly raised in the waterfall, or she took the place of someone who had been. He asked for some water. Hinata gave him what little she had left. No doubt she was a trained assassin, just waiting for the right moment to strike. But, she had a more important mission. Over here, Hinata called out to a soldier carrying a number of lanterns. We could use one of those. She set the light in front of Naruto. Another soldier brought by a bucket of water she had asked for, along with bandages and a clean cloth. Ouch! Naruto jerked away when Hinata began wiping the blood away. You'll never make a medical ninja. Don't be such a baby. Hinata felt much better, even as she cursed herself as a fool. Naruto may be covered with blood, but it was not his own. Removing the blood showed no sign of wounds. She doubted that Kyuubi could have healed everything that quickly. When a pot ran out towards the enemy, she wasn't rushing out to do battle. Naruto splashed some of the water from the bucket on his face. He was still terribly weak, but was feeling a little bit better. She was trying to escape back to her own side, taking the last bit of information that she had gathered. She was under the impression that it might turn the battle in their favor. He paused. I was the one who killed her. You, Hinata sighed. Naruto had certainly played them all. He had always been crafty, but she never thought he would be good at keeping secrets. There was an awful lot of beeping going on. She almost fainted, hearing those words coming out of her own lips. I couldn't help myself, Naruto said. She did write me all of those beautiful letters, didn't she? Not hearing a reply, he asked, right, Hinata? There was still no answer from the Anbu squad leader. As you said, there was a great deal of beeping. It was rather nice, even though she was a spy. He chuckled. Eep. Hinata immediately grew warm in the face after that utterance. Naruto tried to scratch his head through hair stiffened by dried blood. I never thought that I would hear one of the mask bearers squeak like a mouse. He was referencing the animal mask that Hinata wore when she was on patrol. Is that something they teach you? Hinata bit her lip. Damn that man. She thought that he was dying. Before that, he let her continue to think that he cared about that damn spy. Now, he was comparing her to a mouse. She had to think I was besotted with her, Hinata. Naruto sounded much more serious now. Between beeps, I acted like I would slip up every once in a while, giving away village secrets by accident. He winced after coughing a number of times. Everything I gave out had been approved by Tsunade or Jiraiya. Each bit of information could easily be verified as being true. And after a while, you began giving out false leads, Hinata surmised. Things that might seem real, but would fool the enemy in some crucial way. At some important point in time, she nodded her head in admiration. That was truly well done. She sighed. Yes, it was a very complicated deception, Naruto admitted. But, it brought me a great deal of information. Really? Hinata made a face. How could you learn anything from a pot, without giving away the fact that you knew she was a spy? Did I say it was about a pot? Naruto tried to stand but wasn't ready yet. What are you saying, then? Hinata froze again. She knew that Naruto was aware that she had written Apathy's letters for her. Had he guessed the reason? That those notes had been so filled with passion. I'm too tired for any more intrigue, Hyuga Hinata. Naruto said, and I'm in too much pain to sit around here much longer. He looked at her face, glowing red in the lantern light. Is there something you want to tell me? What? Hinata flinched. There isn't. She clenched her fists. She had been ready to confess her feelings earlier, so why couldn't she do it now? No one could have gift-wrapped and handed her a better situation than this one. Naruto held his side, but kept his eyes on Hinata's face. Is this the same man who walked up on stage, in front of the finest of Kohoa's finest citizens, and then chastened poor idiotic Konohamaru, before leaving the hall and giving a more serious lesson to 30 thugs? Hinata hung her head. Is this the same woman who brazenly pretended to be a man from the moon, to delay the approach of an insufferable twit of an officer, protecting the privacy of one she had sworn to serve? Naruto rubbed his chin, and then checked to see if any of his teeth were loose. But, Hinata began rubbing her fingers together. Is this the same woman who gallantly wrote letters for a girl, while she herself? Naruto purposefully left the end of that question open. Hinata was silent again. Finally, after a few moments more, she spoke. Yes. Well then, I have an even more important question. Naruto tugged at one of his ear lobes. Who is more stupid? Me for never realizing the truth, or you, for never telling me how you felt? You, Hinata said. A shy smile formed on her lips. I had to ask, didn't I? Naruto said. After that, the two of them sat quietly for a while, neither knowing just what to say. Sakura and Tsunade walked up, but moved on seeing Naruto shake his head. Hinata found her emotions cresting, almost hoping that Naruto would profess his love for her. But, she knew that wasn't very realistic. Naruto-kun. Yes. Naruto made his way to his feet. He was somewhat wobbly, but he could stand. You said, and I quote, Hinata coughed. She joined Naruto in standing. I must have been driven mad by those beautiful letters you wrote me. At Street, I was captivated with your beauty alone, but then, when you started writing, I came to love the inner you, your soul. She couldn't look at his face, even though the light of the lantern didn't carry that far. Was that all part of the act, too? Well, Naruto looked up at the moon. For some reason, it looked cheerful that night. If they were all lucky, the war would be over, with victory on the side of the leaf and her allies. Just as a magician never gives away his secrets, an accomplished actor never gives away his muse. He grinned. You should know that, Naruto-kun. Hinata's heart was in her voice. This was not the time for jokes. What question did a pot ask, after I gave that answer? Naruto closed his eyes, feeling the evening breeze blowing against his swollen face. Hinata tried to clear her thoughts. A pot asked, do you mean you would love me, even if I was ugly? And I said. Naruto picked up the lantern. You said. Hinata shivered, but not from the breeze. I could give my heart to the woman who wrote those letters. You beeped her and said, that will have to be my farewell. I wanted to be certain that you heard those words before I left. Yes, Naruto said. Now, Did I really have any reason to direct those words to a pot? He paused, letting Hinata think on that a while. If not her, then who? He moved his arms in circles, and then moved his head this way and that, loosening tight muscles. Hinata didn't answer. It was her turn to stare up at the moon. She almost wondered if she had been struck hard on the head, and was dreaming all this. I know that you Hyugas need a lot of time to think, sometimes. Naruto laughed. According to the records, one of your ancestors took over a year to figure out how to open a bottle. Turns out it was an empty. Naruto smiled. Naruto-kun, Hinata made a face. Then there was the Hyuga war leader who kept trying to put his saddle on a chicken. Naruto put his hand in front of the lantern, trying to make a chicken shadow. When a month passed, and his advisors finally got him to realize that poultry did not make good steeds, he turned his attention to the koi pond. Naruto-kun, Hinata frowned. That big Galoof was having too much fun. The funniest of them all was once a very small and shy girl. She used to hide behind anything she came across, twiddling her fingers and talking very quietly. You think she would have been clever enough to know that someone who was going to be Hokage wouldn't be fooled by some second-rate spy the way that she was. Naruto-kun, Hinata shook a fist at Naruto. My, Naruto smiled. Can't take a joke. No wonder they made you head of Anbu. He brushed dirt and leaves off of his blood-soaked robes. Have you ever thought of getting a new mask? Koi, maybe chicken. Baka. Hinata began stomping away. It could have been a special moment, but that moron had to go ruin it with his usual nonsense. A pot would have treated me better than this, Naruto said, moaning when he began walking. Then again, she wanted something from me. Oh. I'm going to hate myself in the morning, but I can't just leave you out here. Hinata came back to give Naruto a hand. I'll wait until you're feeling better before I give you what you deserve. Really? Naruto laughed. Do you mean a kick, or what a pot wanted to give me? Hinata stumbled. Where had that question come from? And just what did Naruto mean? I'll let you wonder about that. She smiled, having found the perfect reply. Who says I will? Naruto chuckled, having found a better answer. Hinata stopped. She found herself filled with doubt. Naruto-kun. Huh. Naruto stopped too. You said that you would love a pot if she were ugly. Hi. Hinata almost couldn't get the next words out. Do you think that I'm ugly? I'll let you wonder about that, Naruto said, aping her words. You. Hinata pressed her lips tightly together. She wanted to scream. Ask me again when I've recovered, Naruto said. From under my balcony. Encore. The trees were heavy with blossoms, and butterflies moved like a living cloud. It was idyllic, the view at Konoha's greatest public garden. But, the scene that was unfolding was anything but tranquil or serene. Hurry, Sajura shouted. She was directing a large number of medical ninjas. Having caught wind of the happenings, Shizune and Tsunade had rushed to be there too. Where's Hinata? Ino stood and looked around. She'll want to be here. If he doesn't pull through, she'll never forgive herself. Or us, Ten said. Looking over one of the manicured hedges, she saw Hinata running, accompanied by a large number of people who had heard that Naruto was injured. Hinata. I'm sorry. Neji stood with his arms out in supplication. I was so angry for your sake. I struck him harder than I intended. Naruto-kun. Hinata tried to make her way to Naruto's side, but was held back by Shino and Kiba. They asked her to let the medical ninjas do their best. If they could stabilize him, he could be moved to the hospital center for more intensive measures. What has that dumbass gotten himself into this time? Sasuke asked, before he realized how serious the situation was. It is my fault. Lee stood off to one side, being consoled by Guy and Ten. Mine too, Shikamaru said. Tamari stood with him, as did Asuma and Choji. I should have been more vigilant, Kakashi said. I never should have let things happen the way they did. Where is that idiot? Jiraiya walked up. Other than a few tufts of gray hair, he hadn't changed much over the years. Tsunade, why aren't you assisting Sakura? We can't afford to lose that boy. He's hardly a boy, Tsunade snapped. Sakura is stronger than me now. It's best that I stay out of her way. Will you all please shut up? Sakura sounded tense. I'm losing him. What? Did you do? Hinata stalked Neji. She was held back by Hanabi, who had happened to be heading to a clan meeting. Come sit over here, Kurenai said, putting her arm around Hinata. Lee, give her the details. Quote, OHHHHHHHHH. Lee ran a hand through his hair, seemingly in no mood to pose. You know that we were all sent to the land of water to safeguard Princess Brainjean during her trip to the Leaf. She had some fertility issues that she wanted to speak to Tsunade about, before she married the Mizukage. Shikamaru added, looking extremely bothered. He stood straighter when Tamari elbowed him in the belly. There are a number of factions in Kirigakure no Sato that are opposed to the wedding. We were on board ship, when unknown forces struck, attempting to sink the craft. Kakashi patted his pocket holding one of the Ika Ika books that he had taken over writing, but left the book there. Powerful jutsus caused the seas to rise up and come over the sides of the deck. Oh, we all fought well, Lee said. Especially Naruto. But, the princess was told by one of her aides. He paused, trying to remember the name. Kurwenal, Shikamaru said, his mind as amazing as ever. He must have been a henchman for the forces acting against Brainjean. He told the princess that it was Naruto who was trying to sink us, and that the Leaf was in league with her enemies. She was a pretty powerful shinobi herself. Kakashi noted. Because Naruto wasn't willing to strike a serious blow against her, Brainjean was able to injure him severely. I was able to keep her from killing him, with the help of Lee, Shikamaru, and the ship's crew. But, I thought he was injured here. Hinata looked over to where Naruto lay. He was still in too serious a condition to move. He was, Kurenai said. Let them continue the tale. Hinata nodded her head. Looking over to one side, she saw that Ichigawa was there. His new bakery was nearby. He must have seen the growing crowd. Even as she watched, musicians and actors all gathered at the fringe of the garden. Naruto was dearly loved by all. Kurwenal, along with the princess's retainers Merold and Tantris, confessed their part in things after Kakashi threatened to use the Tsukiyomi Genjutsu. Shikamaru turned down an offer from Shoji to share a bag of chips. He watched as his rotund friend walked over to speak with Ichigawa. She was very upset, Lee said. She wanted to be the one to cure Naruto. There were more enemies than we realized, at first. Kakashi mentioned. That included Brainjean's handmaiden Mello. The young woman was told to bring a healing scroll. Instead, she brought one for a jutsu that acted just like a love potion in the stories. What? Hinata froze. She used it on Naruto. I'm afraid so, Neji put in. I heard about his actions from some of the men who had accompanied them all on the journey. I thought he was being untrue to you. When he acted like he had done nothing reprehensible, I fought with him. He looked down at his feet. He refused to defend himself. I took that as a confession of sorts. If only I had insisted that he see Tsunade right away, Lee said. She could have removed the effects of the jutsu. Naruto would never have told Neji that he and the princess had become lovers. He took a few steps back, seeing Hinata's face. He didn't care, whether or not Tenten and Guy might think that act cowardly. It grew very tiresome, watching their displays, Shikamaru said. Never a moment went by when they weren't declaring their burning passion for one another. But, I could tell that Naruto was fighting the effects of the jutsu. Kakashi looked over at where Sakura was kneeling next to the village's noisiest ninja. Maybe it was the power of the Kyuubi. Maybe it was his strong love for you. He was surprised when Hinata threw herself in his arms and began sobbing. The musicians had struck up a chord, beginning a succession of slow dirge-like musical pieces. As Hinata watched, Sakura stood up, walked over to the Hokage, and collapsed against her. Tsunade signaled to Kurenai. I think we should go see him now, Kurenai said. Quote, it looks as if Sakura was unable to help. She took one of Hinata's arms and helped her walk. The crowd all drew closer, and the music played louder. Naruto-kun. Hinata dropped to her knees, tears falling off of her chin. You have to pull through. I won't want to live without you. Are you sure? Naruto spoke quietly, his eyes still closed. I've been nothing but trouble to you. He went silent. And Hinata immediately put her ear to his chest. His heart was still beating. When we were younger, you always watched me, but I was too stupid to notice. Don't talk. Naruto-kun, shish. Hhhhh. Hinata put her finger over his mouth. Even as we grew older, and I had returned to the village, I was too clueless, Naruto gasped and then twitched. You changed so much. Because of me, tears fell from his eyes. He was silent again. But, the changes were wonderful. You've become more than someone like me would ever deserve. Hush. Hinata hugged Naruto. Be quiet. She held him like she never intended to let go. You are the best man who ever was. You deserve far better than me. It sound like. Naruto began coughing. Sakura knelt by his side and checked his eyes. She took his wrist and felt his pulse. It sounds like you and I would have been the perfect match. Yes, we would have. Hinata gave Naruto a long beep, tears falling on his face. We would have been the best of couples. The music switched over to a more festive tone. That had Hinata sitting up, a look of anger on her face. This was no cause for celebration. When she turned back to Naruto, she found that he was sitting too. Now that I know how you feel, Naruto smiled and reached into his pocket. And seeing that I gathered the people who mean the most to you. He pointed. Hyuga Hiyashi stepped out from behind a tree heavy with flowers. I have a question for you. Naruto-kun. Hinata looked at everyone around her. They had fooled her completely, but she was the one who was supposed to be an actress. Would you marry me? Hyuga Hinata. He opened a small box. It held a sparkling diamond ring. There never was any infatuation jutsu. Nothing like that could work on me. Not when I have you. He smiled. Yes, Hinata said, wiping the tears from her eyes. Of course I'll marry you. There's just one thing, Naruto said, after a long embrace and a long drawn-out series of applause from their friends. Are you upset that I didn't invite Suzuka and Yukihime to this little charade? Hinata shut Naruto up the best way she knew how. Knocking him down on his back again, she smothered him with beeps. To be continued, and thank you for watching.